OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Past 7 Friday morning, OTB AM. Very good morning to you, wherever it is you are at this morning. Delighted that you could join us on what is hopefully a lovely sunny Friday morning where you're at. It certainly is here. Shane Hannon, good morning to you.
Morning, how are things?
Cameron Hill, good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian.
Kathleen McNamee, good morning to you.
Very good morning.
We have a full house this morning. The roll call is complete. How's everybody?
Bit sad. I saw a clip of Andy Friend leaving the sports ground for the final time yesterday. Big emotional tweet. Felt very series finale about it. Just him pulling out in a camper van, no less, packing up all his memories and assorted Connacht paraphernalia. It felt like, you know, that quote in Shawshank where it's like once you hear the bars closed then you realise it's real. It's like once I saw that photo I was like, oh no, he actually isn't coming back. But
there was that dream.
Yeah, anyway.
I was intrigued when you said he was leaving in a camper van.
Yeah, I was sort of, wow, that's interesting.
Like,
he's going to see the world.
Has any friend just been camped up in the Connacht grounds for the last
he's graduated from Connacht now and he's going on this massive interrail. That's what I think.
He does. I saw a little bit of his social stuff over the last couple of years, and has tended to go off camping and stuff around.
Cycles a lot as well, isn't he?
Yeah, cyclist. Brilliant vistas. Really good advertisement for Galway.
I've been off doing a bit of camping as well. I was in Monaco at the Grand Prix.
Shane's not jealous at all.
Bucket list.
Let's just drop that out there.
Yeah.
Last Sunday, it was amazing. It was absolute bucket list stuff. It was an amazing mix of petrol heads. And there wasn't a huge amount of them, I have to say. But petrol heads, actual F1 fans, posers, an awful amount of them. I don't know if that's typical at Grand Prix generally, but wow. And then rubberneckers, who were the likes of ourselves, who were just there.
I was going to say the question is, which of the three categories do you fall into?
Definitely poser, obviously.
I don't know where I'm going, where I fit into there. But it was an incredible experience, I must say. It was we went to Monaco. We were staying in Nice, went to Monaco on the Saturday just to do a bit of a recce, scout out where we had to go the next day, soak up the atmosphere a little bit, and sort of we arrived in as practice was winding up. So we were about 50 metres away from the track itself, but it's all they screened the place unbelievably well. There is not a square inch to peer through to get even a glimpse of one of these machines, but you can hear them. And the noise that hits you once the first time you hear it it's like a wall of sound. It's incredible, really incredible.
Did you have the earplugs?
I bought earplugs and then just never used them.
Yeah, we had the earplugs when we were over in Spa.
But you get a real respect, I must say, for I'm a Drive to Survivor as opposed to watching F1 every week, far from it. But you do get a real newfound respect for the speed that these drivers are going at, and
especially somewhere like Monaco as well, where you're not on a track, you're literally just going through the city and it's
streets.
And are you able to get a sense of what's going on when you're there? Because I know
in their actual race. Great question. You do for about 10 or 12 laps.
Okay,
you're all over it. You're like, oh, this is the order. This is exactly what's happening. Monaco is a procession rather than a race is the general cliche about it, and it was absolutely true on Sunday as well. After that, you just lose all sense.
Okay,
you do have the seating. One of the big appeals of the seats is how close you are to a big screen to be able to follow what's going on, and we did have a screen near us, but you do equally. You're like, was that? Yeah. Which one was that?
Who was that?
Was that
bit of red
Checo,
there.
or was that?
Yeah.
It's hard to, at some point or another, it is very hard. There was a guy that was sat just in front of us who was like a monster Checo fan. So he was videoing Checo every time we went past. So I was like, okay, well that's him. But it's a great question. You do totally lose track of who's where. Yeah. But just exception, the yachts. This is obviously the thing about sort of Monaco, and the seats that we were in were placed out on the water. So that you could go down, and actually I felt at one point I could just walk onto that yacht. Nobody's going to say anything to me here. This will be fine.
It looked like you belong.
Just and I didn't, but that would have been the biggest challenge to the whole thing. But the wealth is
insane,
disgusting.
There was one year at Monaco where Kimi Räikkönen crashed out, and then literally you can see him walking with his helmet and uniform still on, and he walks right to the dock, takes off his helmet and stuff, just walks onto a yacht, and the next thing, half an hour later, he's sipping beers with his mates.
Yeah, right.
He just didn't give a crowd. He was like, let me get
you can buy that stuff. You can buy hospitality packages to get yourself on. Now they're about $3,000 and up to get yourself onto a yacht. And also, depending on the yacht you're on, you can be really far removed from actually being able to see anything.
The actual racing.
It's amazing to me that people are from Monaco. It just seems that it's it's more of a concept.
A fun fact about Kathleen: I went to school in Monaco for 6 weeks when I was in senior infants.
Wow!
Yeah,
senior infants.
In senior infants, yeah. It was a very studious time for Kathleen, obviously. Yeah, no, my dad had a residency in the Princess Grace Library over there.
Wow.
So we went over and lived there for 6 weeks. And for some reason, the nursery kind of school that I went into had a teacher from Dublin. So all the kids were speaking like 5 different languages because they were all very well-to-do and had like teachers since the age of like 2 to teach them different languages, and then I was just there chatting to this Dublin woman. But yeah, no, like Monaco's class. I mean, the wealth there. I was like 5 or 6 at the time, and I can still remember it. The insane levels of wealth and the people that you would meet, and they would just be like dripping in jewels and stuff. I had a funny story where we went to the aquarium in Monaco, and we came out and there was loads of paparazzi outside, and my dad worked out that it was like the princesses of Monaco were going by, and that's why all the paparazzi was there. So he was like, 5 or 6 year old daughter, she's gonna be excited. He brought me over, like put me on his shoulders, and he was like, Kathleen, look, there's the princesses. And I was like, where are the princesses? Because it was just 2 girls in tracksuits getting into a car, and I was like, they're not princesses, like where's the dresses? And there was just all these like French paparazzi like laughing at me, being like, oh, she's so small, so tiny,
so innocent.
Yeah. I still remember it so clearly, like the pure disappointment in my mind that they weren't wearing princess dresses. Like I think they were coming back from a night out or something, so they were properly like hanging.
What's the Monegasque chicken fillet roll? I'd love to know.
Good
what's
question.
their hangover cure?
They had a good Monoprix. Not Carrefour, one of the other ones
up the top. So even more than, because famously it's like Carrefour and then Monoprix is like the Tesco.
Yeah,
so
no,
even better than those.
No, somewhere in the middle. It was basically a food supermarket in the middle of Monaco for the likes of us who were not going to be sort of. There was also like restaurants that had trackside. You could book to sit and have lunch trackside.
Right.
I mean,
the money involved.
Is there any other sport that's like that
Flavors would be
central to a big event in that way?
It's a very good question. I looked at it and I thought there must be like 100,000 fans that are here that have paid to get a seat at this thing, because like the vast, and it's less than 40,000.
Yeah.
That you can actually buy a ticket for. Now there's another, I don't know how many
people in their apartments
and the balconies and stuff.
Yeah.
And they're all sold as well. It is a
don't miss a
mean, lean money machine.
It's a bizarre one. Like, because even Rebecca Clancy on the F1 pod this week was talking about it's her least favourite one to cover, just because she's done it so often and the wealth involved, and once you've done it you've done it. And also, as you said, that the Saturday, generally the qualifying is outrageously good in Monaco, but sometimes the race can be, as you say, a procession.
Thanks for flagging that up, by the way. That's great to know now, Shane.
I all these recommendations afterwards.
You see, it's unlike Baku. Baku's another street circuit, but there's a little bit more maybe overtaken, whereas Monaco tends to be, if you finish qualifying on pole, you have a strong
1-2-3 finish 1-2-3.
That's the thing, like,
and it was never really in doubt.
It still can be exciting because they're millimetres from the side. Anything can happen, like. But
that's the thing. So when you watch it on TV, you just see this procession, and it's like as if there's like a thread between them, and they just follow and they follow and they follow. Yeah. When you're looking at it, like at that speed and the distance between them is. It is frightening.
It's terrifying.
The rain came down after whatever it was, like 50 odd laps, and it became very clear to me why people were actually at the race, because I'm not saying people were sedate up to that point, but it was certainly like there wasn't a lot
people
of
cheering the rain a little bit.
When the rain came in and the slip sliding start, the oohs and the ahs, and the like, suddenly everybody was sort of out of their seat, and it was much more it became much more exciting.
Is that because it was easier to understand if you're in the crowd? As in, like, if everyone's just driving around in a procession, it's probably easier.
Adrian can't watch sport if there's no rain involved because he's Irish. Is that it? It's only this.
Well, particularly with F1.
But it's then the tyre choice, obviously, and when you pitch and all that comes in. So, like,
well, the other thing is you don't have a full appreciation for all that stuff like that emerges afterwards about Alonso not choosing the right tyres, maybe going a bit earlier, but like all those little nuances. And maybe there were people around me who knew exactly what was going on at all times, and you do have a little bit of French commentary and a bit of English commentary going on while you're there. So you do keep, but again, you can't really hear that once the engines crack in. So there's a load of stuff that happens afterwards. You're like, oh, all right, okay.
Will you follow it more now, week to week?
No. That's it.
Just one and done.
That's it. And I wouldn't ever really go back to Monaco for the Grand Prix again.
Right.
That's it.
Would you do another Grand Prix
I
somewhere?
would be very interested in going to a race.
Right, yeah.
For sure.
A good proper.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of F1 fans that probably look down their noses at people who go to Monaco to see a Grand Prix.
You have to take it off at some stage as well. I haven't been. I've only done Spa, which was the terrible. I won't remind viewers.
Oh
of
no,
the
go on ahead.
Story now.
I've never heard this.
No, I've never heard this story. People in the comments generally will like to hear it. Yeah, the one where it was clearly rained out. I was like, let's go to Spa. There's loads of rain, and there was too much rain. So
no race.
Whole thing was cancelled. It was we got a few procession laps and formation laps. It was a disaster. Let's just say in the Ardennes forest in Belgium. But I had fun regardless. Few beers.
I had my fun.
Yeah.
There's loads to get through, and we have a great lineup for you this morning. Between now and 10 o'clock, we've Gilly Flaherty coming up to talk about the closeout of the WSL. Interesting final day, and we'll get her thoughts on the fallout from that. England squad name as well during the weekend. A small matter, the Champions League final this weekend. Lots to talk to Gilly about. We're going to talk to Alan Quinlan, who we haven't had him since the Ireland squad has been named, and there's some very interesting thoughts from his former colleague Ronan O'Gara in the Examiner this morning about the pecking order for the Irish number 10 shirt. So we'll get Quinny's thoughts on that. Let you know what's happening across all the back pages just before 9 o'clock this morning. Daniel Harris will preview the FA Cup final this weekend, and what an interesting fixture it is. Manchester Derby, first time ever an FA Cup final, which took me a little bit by surprise, I must say. And Eamon McGee then on the latest round of the Football Championship, and John Giles, who was in conversation with Nathan on the show last night. So that's all coming your way in a little bit. First of all, the Jose Mourinho fallout continues, and his pretty shocking abuse of the referee Anthony Taylor after the Europa League final during the week. Shocking lack of awareness on his own part in terms of the power and influence that he carries and the impact that it can have. And we have seen the scenes in the Rome airport, I think it was, as Anthony Taylor went to fly home with his family, and we can give you, I think, a look at those on screen there now if you haven't managed to come across it up to now. But there he is with what appears to be certainly some members of his family.
It was reported that it was his daughter and wife with him, and then there was also his mum was there, and I think his son, which you can't see in that video, but there's another video of a bottle being thrown at them when they're at like one of the airport bars, and then you see there on the video a chair being thrown at them as well. That
is insanity. Like, you can see the daughter in tears, the wife's probably in tears there as well. But like, shocking in one sense, Adrian, of the word, but that Mourinho would have stooped to those levels, but also not shocking. Like you almost half expect Mourinho with the antics on the side of the pitch throughout the game, and clearly he's bred it into his Roma players as well, because every single little decision, the officials, and Michael Oliver as well as the fourth official, were getting harried and harassed, and it's a terrible example to set. And when you see the video then, even in the car park, the lack of action by the officials, I mean by the legal officials, the police that are there, or security underneath the stadium, and then in the airport, I don't know what the police are doing standing there, but they are the airport police, whoever they were, but
they look so disinterested in getting involved. Like, it's not even like they kind of go around Taylor and his family to give them a little bit of backing. They just kind of stand back and let people attack them. And the other thing as well, like, Mourinho talked in his post-match press conference that they lost with dignity, and he kept his dignity intact, and then you see him like standing outside waiting, as you said, in the car park for Anthony Taylor, calling him an effing crook and an effing disgrace, and is he Spanish and all this sort of stuff. And you're like, how deluded are you that you think you lost with dignity, and that you're it's schoolyard sort of stuff. It's like the bully waiting for you outside the schoolyard gates whenever you finish up school, and they're like, oh well, I can't get you in school because I'll get in trouble then, but I'll wait for you just outside the grounds, so I won't.
See, that's where I disagree. I think that's the football version of dignity, is the part and parcel of coming off the back of a really tight defeat, is that you go after the ref. And like it's not like this sense of decorum and respect for your opponents and respect during the game, in the sense of, well, we went down with pride. The ref isn't involved in that. They're considered ancillary to the entire experience. They are as much your opposition as your actual opposition. So when you dehumanize the referee, as he did when he went to the car park, I wasn't surprised.
I think the car park stuff goes beyond dehumanizing the referee even. Like, that's just pure intimidation and it's a lack of respect, it's intimidation, it's giving other people the right to do what they did to Anthony Taylor in the airport. Like, at the end of the day, you have to accept that, like, Mourinho is a professional. He gets paid hundreds of thousands of euro every single week to play the game, and if he wants to run off the bench every time one of his players gets like a little bit of a touch, that's fine, that's his choice. But what he did after the game and saying that, you know, he won with dignity, or he lost with dignity, and that, you know, he was totally respectful, and then to sit in the car park, like, that's putting out a narrative that you can do whatever you want and say whatever you want.
Yeah, but it's the fact that he sees the camera in the car park, he sees people filming, or certainly the person filming that we saw the clip of, and it's like he still doesn't care, he continues. And then you wonder then, we were talking yesterday about how those Roma fans love Mourinho, described him as Caesar, I think, and like Mourinho essentially gave them permission to go out and be that vociferous and outrageously aggressive in the airport. Like his actions on the sideline, and certainly his actions in the car park after the game, was basically a free pass for the Roma fans, going, this guy's subhuman, totally. This referee.
Well, I think we need to be careful with that, but you certainly have to take the point that he carries sway, and he has certainly riled up the fans, but I do think like that you can't dismiss the personal responsibility of
course, yeah.
Oh no, of course
absolute
not.
thugs that turn up in an airport to attack a family. And like, as mad as he is, and like, you know, he's an Alex Ferguson disciple. Ferguson is, I would say, living in his head non-stop. What would Fergie do here? I'm sure is a question that comes to him regularly, and that would have been absolutely classic textbook Alex Ferguson carry on. Absolute textbook. You've seen it a million times, ranting and raving at the referee. You wouldn't want to dissociate the personal responsibility of those thugs that turn up at the airport from what he was doing. Now, I certainly take the point that there's an influence between, there's an invisible line between one and the other. I totally take that. But like, all of this stuff is just such an accepted part of football, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like,
well, I mean, think about Klopp and the fourth official a few weeks ago, and running up and celebrating, and then going after that. They've a vendetta against us, it seems. Like that. There's a good long read in The Guardian from a few weeks ago, talking about the life of a referee, and I think Andre Mariner was explaining that he'd go in for the pre-match sort of preamble of a game, and players would be coming in with their kids, and they said, there's the referee, boo. And that seems jovial and sort of, you know, whatever, but you know, the fact that that's treated in a lighthearted manner, that the referee is automatically the enemy from the off, that can't be good either.
You also have the impact of that sort of carry on, because kids are paying attention to it. That clip that you mentioned, Kathleen, doing the rounds, like, will have tens and tens of millions of views. There are kids paying attention to that. I see it on the sidelines all the time, every weekend, where there are kids mimicking whatever they see in games of the weekend, whether it's celebrations or skills or styles of goal. So it's also that's how we speak to that's how you deal with the referee. And like, often at that level, those referees are not adults, they're teenagers who are stepping in to do a job. And the more you talk to people, I'm only very new to that scene, the more you talk to people who are involved in it over a number of years, the more you see how outrageous the behaviour can be on a fairly regular basis. And that would be the concern for me, that sort of mimicking of what you see. And there is a responsibility there. And I also think that, like, when you talk about football accepts this, like, football could do away with this tomorrow if there were serious people, in the words of our good friend Logan Roy, if they were in any way interested in stamping this thing out, they could do it like that.
Yeah.
They just could. And it's not, people talk about, it has to be this sort of bottom-up approach, or no, just straight away, Premier League, Champions League, Europa League, all of them. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we are going to sanction you. If you overstep this line again, here's what's going to happen.
We should qualify it by saying it's not limited to football either. I mean, there's very high profile cases in the GAA recently of refs having enough. Personally, I don't necessarily think the stuff in the Champions Cup final was great for Jakob Hyper. You know, whatever you decide about his decisions, you know, you can't. I don't think there's any point having that Ferrari at halftime. Certainly the French Open, you've seen umpires like getting an earful from players. Even when we play tag rugby on a Wednesday, the stuff that the refs get is ridiculous. They get, and that's a social league where, you know, it's only a bit of crack.
Abuse, like,
yeah,
really.
total abuse, like calling someone an effing disgrace on the pitch for, those refs aren't paid. This is meant to be a bit of fun, and they're getting dogs abuse, and the refs have actually, like, they will give out a yellow card, but you can see that there's a little bit of a resigned, this is part of it now.
Yeah,
like, that's sick.
Yeah,
it really is.
But it's like Ref Support UK were the group, I think, that originally tweeted it, or certainly one of the tweets that went viral yesterday. They were the ones who commented on it, and they were saying that this has got to the worrying phase now, where a serious incident or a murder is only around the corner, and you're, Adrian, wondering when things like this are going to change. It'll take a referee to be being killed. A high profile referee after some incident like this, and that might sound like something that's absolutely never going to happen, but look at those scenes yesterday. I mean, it's not that hard to think about a referee being seriously injured or killed by a group of hostile fans who are upset over a number of decisions. It's terrifying, and just to see his family with him as well. It's just,
I think it's unfortunate that, like, it's bad that it happened, but also the timing of it happening as well. Like, it's the end of the season. If Mourinho does, like, we don't even know if Mourinho is going to stay at Roma. He has another year left on his contract, I think, but there was a bit of talk that he might move on. And if he does, like, if he gets a financial penalty, it's not going to mean anything to him. If he gets a ban, there's also a chance that you don't know where he's going to be or where he's actually going to play it out. And he has said before, when he's got bans, that he doesn't really care. Klopp said the same thing as well when he got his ban. He was like, it's kind of good because, like, I have a better view of the pitch. And, like, these guys aren't even taking it seriously whenever they're getting punished for these things. So you're like, how do you punish?
Well, that's it. And we were talking about it pre-show about the stuff in Cork City and certain other issues in football. You made the point that it doesn't really, it could be racism or homophobia or anything, but it just seems impossible to dislodge these feelings of hatred and this circle of abuse that, for all the show racism, the red card, etc., there's but if you put in an appeal, you might get off. Like, you'll still be in the football ecosystem, really.
Yeah, and sorry, this notion does the rounds, and I absolutely understand that rugby has more respect, generally speaking, I would say, than football when it comes to referees and officials, but that's not to say that it doesn't exist in rugby. Like, rugby is not clean of this whatsoever. The referee abuse happens in every single sport.
Well, you look at, like, even the Champions Cup final, how much of this narrative after that was about the fact of how the referee was treated, and whether it's like Sean O'Brien being stationed outside the dressing room to make sure that, like, O'Gara or whoever it was in the La Rochelle team can't get near him, or the things that Johnny Sexton said to him afterward, when they're on the pitch and they're reffed or they're mic'd up and stuff, it's easier to be like, okay, there's a bit of respect there, but there's also the things that you probably don't see as much as well behind the scenes.
But even our conversations with Vinnie Perth every week, and we can't help this, but every week invariably we end up talking about referees at some point, because there have been a number of decisions that have been proved controversial, or maybe teams have thought they were controversial in League of Ireland matches. And I was chatting to someone recently who was at a League of Ireland match, and they were like, I think they were standing near the corner flag, and they were standing beside a group of people who, for the entire duration of the first half, were just abusing the linesman, running, like, jogging down and he can't avoid it. He has to stay along that line, and for 45 minutes has to listen to a torrent of abuse over maybe one offside call that they felt was incorrect. That's just one example at one League of Ireland match, but it happens week in, week out. So I don't know why you'd be a referee.
No. I was talking to a former professional ref this week, and he made a point, to be the devil's advocate here for a second, that he feels that referees are far too friendly with players as well off the pitch. And, you can kind of see what he means. The referees that constantly go up to Messi and Ronaldo and want a selfie, like, that must water down the relationship slightly as well.
I don't know. I think that is just a different issue.
Do you not think it sort of softens their authority?
It's an interesting point, but I just think it's a totally different issue. It can't muddy the absolute desperate need for referees to be protected, which, that's stuff. Look, we've seen it before, and Ireland playing Portugal, and the referee is like buttering up Ronaldo so he can go up to him after and get the jersey off him, and it's frustrating and all that. But, like, I just think that there's another side to that. I think this one is, could we bring in sanctions straight away? Just, edict from the top down. We're going to sanction if you're approaching the referee, if you're giving out. You hear the language, you see the mouthing all the time. It's just part of the culture. It's just like, sure, why would you not do that? Get in the referee's ear. And I just think that's a single issue that could be dealt with really quickly if there was any appetite to do it, which, I don't know. Apparently there's not. Loads of comments coming in about this one, and do keep them coming in. Not all of them we can necessarily read out, it must be said. But somebody said it was a soccer version of Trump and Trumpism, that Mourinho's a clown. It doesn't happen in rugby, says Damien, which I think we've established is not exactly the case.
I feel like that was sarcastic from Damien there.
Yeah, there is clearly a better culture in rugby. Like they have taken very clear steps to protect the referee from a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. It's the outlier. There are outlier examples. There are examples, but they're outliers. There
is also the point to like what you were saying earlier, Adrian, about like personal responsibility and stuff. I do think there is something on UEFA and the fact that they didn't provide Taylor and his family with appropriate cover. They kind of. They would have known if he was going through the airport at that time there was going to be fans there who were probably unhappy.
That's
probably
on UEFA as well.
Absolutely.
UEFA need to give that man a bit of A, security, or B, private access to some way out of Budapest, because that was ridiculous.
Yeah, because like for all we give out about the fans who actually attacked him, idiot's gonna idiot, so you have to mitigate it somehow.
Yeah, UEFA can well afford a private plane for him and his family and all the other officials back to England.
And I also think though as well that would go some way to them acknowledging that there is a problem. Like if you have to provide that sort of cover for your referees, then you're acknowledging that there's a problem, you're acknowledging that they need that cover. And
that's it.
It leaves them with less excuses, I suppose, the other side, when Mourinho does say something or another referee says something, or another manager, said something about a referee. Yeah.
Well, there'll be all the usual wringing of hands now after this, and isn't it terrible? And well, we really should look to do something about it. But Fergus Keogh, good morning to you, Fergus. It's up to the authorities to clamp down and support the refs. Insult the ref on the pitch, red card. Insult the ref in post-match, 10-game ban. That's it. Simple as that. That does away with it. That does away with 95% of this stuff overnight. Like, it's incredible to me that it hasn't happened so far. Super Ken says that the media are complicit in this, though. How often are players diving, cheating, claiming corners, throw-ins that aren't theirs? They're gaslighting the referees and abusing them when they get stuff wrong. Again, I just think that's another thing that needs to be looked at. But I just think one thing at a time. This is a very simple thing. It doesn't need to be overly complicated.
There's no nuanced language here. It's not being put down to like that horrible phrase, gamesmanship. It's just abuse.
And who's making? By the way, when that comes up right around whatever boardroom, who's putting their hand up to go? Sorry, no. Could we not do this? Like, could we allow this to continue?
Yeah.
Is there somebody in the room saying that? Like, I just don't understand what let's just go and do this.
If Johnny going to come out today, I feel like a referee.
Yeah.
So that is that piece. Like it's. I'm sure we haven't heard the last of it. By the way, I'm sure that will continue. Some other bits and pieces doing the rounds. Quinlan Kelleher is leaving Liverpool, so says Stephen Kenny. News to Jurgen Klopp, and I did wonder, was like Quinlan Kelleher, because Nathan said to him, like, okay, and you've been chatting to him, and he was like, we chat all the time. It's like, is this news to people? I thought this was the private conversations I was having with Quinlan. Surely everybody knows this stuff, but it turns out that they don't. But equally, at 24 years of age, the sentiment that Stephen Kenny was expressing about Quinlan Kelleher getting the hell out of there to get some football is bang on.
Needs to.
I think so, but he also said the same about O'Benny yesterday as well, and it kind of felt like one of the worst sales pitches of all time. It's like, I've got all these quality players, why can't I shift them? It kind of felt, I don't know, maybe just let nature take its course a little bit. But
where's he going to go?
That's the thing. Like, there aren't many top flight clubs that need a goalkeeper. Does he go to a championship team? I mean, maybe. That's not the worst thing for Quinlan Kelleher. Get some game time, get 42 games under his belt or whatever it is in the championship next year.
Better than that, isn't he? I mean,
how do we know that?
Exactly. I take that point entirely. But it appears as though he's better than that.
He seems to be
judging by the last game of the season.
Well, yeah, conceded 4.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Keylor Navas moves away from Forest, there's an opening there for him. I think.
I also thought he was a bit iffy on a couple of those. Sometimes you can concede 4 goals and not be at fault for any, but I did think for 1 or 2 he was maybe.
And then he will make the case, and we will, because we want him to succeed. That it's impossible to be just thrust into it, having no game time behind you.
Yeah, there has to be a level of ring rust.
Yeah.
That was his first Premier League appearance of the season in the last game, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, that you got to move. You got to move clubs. Like, I'm sure he's quite happy. Like, maybe for him it's just a career, pick up the decent money. I'm sure he's getting Liverpool and go to training.
Well, I think it's an easy thing to do when they're winning medals.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And
when they've gone to shit now, I think he's like,
no, totally. And I think Phil Egan made a good point that there'll be some Europa League games next year that Liverpool might be able to put out a weakened side. So maybe Quiveen's appearances might hit double figures next year. That'll be good. But I do think regular game time, as we've said, despite them going down, I think Bazunu's experience at Southampton this year will stand to him in years to come. It's all about just getting game time and getting experience and getting the knowledge of the game, because I think, as we see, goalkeepers really come into their own kind of towards the end of their career.
It comes down to his own ambition. He's 24 now. Does he want to be a Republic of Ireland #1 goalkeeper? Is that how he wants to be remembered? Like, does he want to be Shea Given, or does he want to be, with all due respect to number 2s over the years, Dean Kiley or Paddy Kelly? No, but these lads have great careers.
Wow.
They're great careers at club level. But do you not want to be? Do you not want to look back in your career when you're 35, 40 and go, I was the number 1 for my country for a set number of years? Is that not a fair thing?
waking up this morning and started going about his day. And
no offence, Paddy Kelly had a great career. And a number of Irish caps. But and you can still have a great club career. But if he has any international ambitions, he has to be playing regularly week in, week out.
Spurs crying out for a keeper, says one commentator here. I mean, look at that.
Spurs has come up quite a lot about whenever Kelleher is mentioned.
And it is, if you're a club like Tottenham, the point that the conversation is going to be, well, we haven't really seen enough of him, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true.
So, that's it. It's catch-22 a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, Cameron, Kathleen, thanks a million. An early fire pit, I offer to say.
Bank holiday special. Yeah.
2 minutes past 8. Delight you could join us here on OTB AM this morning. You're here with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shaver, your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now, and it's time for the cash machine.
Off the Balls Cash Machine.
Alright, congrats to Aidan Maloney from Cork, who became our first June winner when he answered our call yesterday. It's a great way to start the bank holiday. Of course, someone else is going to be celebrating in the sunshine and style, as we will have a guaranteed winner of 30k today, and taking part is easy. So every day we're going to give you a new amount. You just make a little note of it, enter the competition, and today at 3 o'clock we're going to give you a call, and you need to give us the cash amount, and you will win that cash. The cash machine has been reloaded. The amount that you need to know, and that will be won today, is €31,118.27. €31,118.27. To enter, text OTB to 57557. That's 57557. Text OTB, and if it's you, we're going to call you back after 3 o'clock. Answer your phone within 5 rings. Tell us the prize amount, and you will win the cash. So it's OTB to 57557, and cost there is €2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You have to be over 18. You're playing across the Go Loud network. Full terms are available on our website on offtheball.com. You can get your entry in by 3 o'clock today, Friday, June 2nd, and we could be calling you. Answer within 5 rings to tell us the prize amount, and the cash is yours. The amount again, get your pens ready, €31,118.27. Text OTB to 57557. That's 57557. And a reminder that if you're listening to this after 3 o'clock on Friday, June 2nd, do not enter unless you know the current cash machine amount, as you will be charged and your entry will be invalid.
Off the Balls Cash Machine.
Up after the break, Gilly Flaherty, but before all of that, here's a clip from our brand spanking new F1 podcast, hosted by our very own Formula 1 specialist who's never been to an actual Grand Prix, Shane Hannon. The F1 pod on OTB, brought to you by Chicago Town Pizza. Real takeout taste for less with Chicago Town.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. The Koigig Pod on Off the Ball.
Basically, she's in your team because you're afraid she would want to take it out on our girl.
The Koigig Pod on Off the Ball. Subscribe to the feed in the OTB Sports app now.
That is the thing, David, isn't it? As Rebecca says, it is millimeters, not centimeters. And like when you see how close Verstappen, all of the drivers to be fair, but certainly in that final sector of the final lap in qualifying, how close he's getting to the barriers, and there is zero room for error. But I mean, that's just the way Max Verstappen drives. It's penny or collar stuff.
Yeah, having been involved in the sport for eons, that actually performance from Verstappen in that last sector, and each of the sectors was still outstanding, was Senna-esque, was really a one-off. And I can fully endorse what Christian Horner said, probably the best of his career. Now, you're approaching to back at about 260 kilometres an hour, and you've got to give yourself a margin there on the inside and the outside. And actually, if you watch him in the car, he actually throws the car into the corner, brushes the barrier on the inside, runs along the barrier on the outside. There was no margin, absolutely no margin for error. Through the swimming pool complex, lifts the car up into the air on the throttle a nanosecond before anyone else, drifts it up to Ras Kass and around the two corners. It was absolutely stunning. And I don't think he had the quickest car that weekend. I think what you saw from the McLarens potentially with their new modifications and what you saw from Alonso, I think they had better cars there that weekend. But for Verstappen, it was a tightrope walking act with no safety net. It was simply outstanding. And it was, for me, as I said, there's not many places you'll see elite sportsmen put their life on the line. And you get that on a Saturday. Each and every one of them dig deeper than they've ever dug before. It was stunning.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
All right, 6 minutes past 8. We've rugby with Alan Quinlan to come very shortly, and plenty more as well. Besides, before all of that, I'd just welcome back to the show Gilly Flaherty. Morning, Gilly.
Morning, how are you?
I was going to say one last shot for the year, but it probably won't be that long before we have you back on again, because there's a lot in the calendar upcoming. But we do need to pick through events. Obviously, last weekend, the WSL done and dusted. The top two did what was needed in the end of the final day. Arsenal finished with a bit of a whimper, but they had third lockdown regardless. But Chelsea are the story. Needed to win to be certain. They were 2-0 up at half time against Reading. Job done and worthy winners.
Yeah, and I mean, I was commentating on the game, and yeah, I mean, Chelsea, I was speaking to the Emma before the game, and there was never no hint of, this could be a tough game or anything like that. I think they was fairly confident that they was going to get the result, and yeah, they come out. In the first, I'd say 10-15 minutes, Reading done well. They was keeping possession of the ball, but they never really had a real threat, and then Chelsea obviously get the first goal. They get the second just before half time as well, which ultimately kills the game. And Reading, they had one chance. They had a header, but it was only ever going to be one team that's going to win that game, and obviously they got the job done, and they won the league. Yeah,
and won it with Reading still fighting for it. It wasn't as if they were just there to be bowled over as well. They had actually something to play for themselves. Will you talk to us, just tease out on Emma Hayes a little bit more, because inevitably when a season ends and a team ends up victorious, everybody ends up picking through the details as to why this has come to pass. And one of the things has been about Emma Hayes' attention to detail about the key backroom appointments, sleep coaches, one-to-one nutrition, supplements, and monitoring training loads around menstruation. Noteworthy, it felt to me reading it, Gilly, because it's possibly not happening at many other clubs.
Yeah, I mean, Emma's always been the best of the best. Like from when I was there at Chelsea, obviously Man City at the time put in a lot of money as well when I was at Chelsea, but anything we wanted, Emma made sure that we got, and she's always constantly looking to improve, so in regarding like the menstrual side of things, and players' ACL injuries, and like when players were coming back from England camps or international camps in general, it was about looking after them, and I know it does help because Emma's got a big squad, so she can rotate players, she can manage players' minutes. But all the other side of things in regards to the sleep, I know they've got like recovery chambers down there They've got everything that the club need and the players need, and that just shows. And I know obviously it all talks about budgets, etc. But if you're looking at Arsenal men, you're looking at the Man City, Man United, they've all got the same budget in that side of things to put that into the women's. You know, it's not like Chelsea, the men's side is the most successful and they've got more money than anyone else. That's not the case, because in regards to the finer details, like getting a sleep coaching, you know, I know when I was at West Ham, we had a sleep coach there as well, who really helped, especially more so the international players when they come back from travelling and, you know, the jet lag and everything like that, which is obviously there's more international players in the Chelsea women's team, but it's just that finer detail and the attention to detail that Emma brings that other clubs really they need to learn from her.
I find that incredible. Like I exactly like you're saying, like the scale of some of the clubs that you've mentioned there, that and so all of those concepts, most of those concepts have been known for some time, are understood and are implemented over in the men's game. Why is it not happening on the women's side?
I don't know. Is it potentially budgets? Is it? Listen, Chelsea. I mean, most women's clubs probably run at a loss anyway, in regards to what they bring in what they generate in regards to the club. But you're looking at Chelsea, like it's proven they have success every single year. They're always winning titles. They're winning trophies. You know, you've obviously got the Champions League that they go far in. But I do think it's a case of just buying into it, you know, and the women's game's only going one way, it's going up. And it's not even if you take out the top four as such, but it's about getting other clubs who are lower down the pyramid, who are lower down the league, to invest in their women's team, you know, because what you don't want is what you see sometimes throughout this season was the top four, potentially top five break away, and then the rest are all sort of sitting near the bottom fighting for the scraps.
Emma Hayes certainly leading the way, Gilly, when it comes to management levels and levels reached in the WSL. We saw the news this week of Lydia Bedford being appointed the Brentford under-18 boys head coach. So, of course, Lydia is former Leicester City women's manager. She's leaving her position as Arsenal assistant manager at the women's setup as well. Seems like it's a small thing and a small first step, but it seems like an important move as well. That it's fairly landmark in that she's coming into the men's game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it is a huge position for her to take up. It's going to be completely different to coaching and managing women. It's the same, I think, when you get men who have worked in the men's game come into the women's game, that you have to learn to do things a little bit differently. It's natural. So that'll be the same vice versa with Lydia going over to that side of things. But it is, and you look forward, I know people say, but you look forward to a day where a woman managing a men's side or a boys' side or a boys' academy, that isn't news, you know, because it is the norm, you know, and it is fantastic because someone's done it. And like you said, it is a landmark, and you want to encourage more women to get involved in coaching alone, whether that's with boys or whether that's with girls, because there's not enough women's coaches. But you look forward to a day where it's just going to be like, oh, so-and-so, she's gone and got a job with the men's team. Oh, brilliant. You know, rather than, because it is a huge thing, but it only hopefully will entice more women to take those opportunities.
And I think whether we like it or not, like an owner of one of those clubs soon is going to go, Emma Hayes is doing some serious job at Chelsea and we need to get her in.
Yeah, and I spoke about this the other day because the FA have done like a Chelsea mural of Guru writing, which I went down to sort of launch. And one of the reporters there asked about Emma and said about her going into the men's side. And you sort of you want to encourage it because, like I said, it would be huge for the women's game in general and for Emma. But at the same time, you don't want to lose Emma from our women's game because she's so good. She fights for so much, you know, and she is one of the best managers that there is. So you don't want to lose her. You want to keep hold of her. I don't know what Emma's aspirations are, whether she wants to go into the men's game or whether she wants to continue to drive the women's game forward. I'm not too sure, but it's selfish from, say, my point of view, that I want Emma to stay in the women's game because I know that she can fight for a lot for us and she can drive us forward.
Yeah, well, that makes total sense. Who knows what Arsenal might have done this season, but for the injuries, and in the window they'll lose a major centre back option. A couple of players that are out of contract that there's not so much clarity just yet as to whether they're going to stay or not. There's the McKay will she won't she stuff. Feels like a really important window for Arsenal to try and bridge that 11-point gap.
Yeah, and I think from like you sort of got like the last game of the season vibes in their game against Villa. Obviously Villa deservedly so took the 3 points, 1-2-0. But it was sort of seemed a bit like we're done, we're dusted. You know, we need a break. You feel for a lot of the players who have had to put in over 150% this year because of the fact of the injuries and the things that the team have gone through emotionally as well. Like, it's just been a constant up and down for them. But the main thing is that they secured Champions League for next season, which was huge for the club. But yeah, I think off season you'd be interested to see how Jonas recruits. And I think if there's anything that Arsenal would have learned this year, would have been in the sense of if we do get a couple, 2-3 serious injuries, we still have a squad big enough and good enough to compete and not fall away. You're looking at Chelsea, you're looking at Frank Kirby and Pernille Harder basically spent majority of the season out, and Chelsea still managed to go and do the double. And so that's where that you need that squad depth. I think it's huge that they've secured Frida Marnham on a new contract because she's been huge for them. But now it is about in the off season. Obviously, Raffaelli's gone, so now you need to get more centre backs in. You know, you've already got one of your centre backs who is out for quite a while. Obviously, you do have Mead coming back, who seems to be flying with a rehab. Miedemar's obviously still to come back too, but then you can't put a lot of pressure on players, especially when they're coming back from ACLs, to come back flying, and you've got to give them time to get settled back into the game. But it'll be interesting to see what he does, especially in this off season.
You mentioned the Arsenal manager Jonas Eidevall there, Gilly, and he's written a really interesting first of a series of columns, I think, in the Guardian that he's going to be doing over the next number of weeks. But kind of a preview of tomorrow's Champions League final between Wolfsburg and Barcelona, and he's pointing out the narrative of the previous few Champions League finals where there's been a really, really fast start by one team, profiting from their goal scoring opportunities early on, getting that early lead, and I think he's right, isn't he? The first 15 minutes of this final, as he puts it, tomorrow will be very, very intense.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how both teams start. I mean, obviously you're looking at Wolfsburg in their semi-finals against Arsenal. I mean, they had a great start at home because obviously, but that was through Arsenal's mistakes that they got so 2-0 up early on. And you're looking at Barcelona, who they started fast against Chelsea in their semi-final, but then struggled to really break down Chelsea for the remaining of those games. So it'd be interesting to see how both teams come out. Obviously, if you're looking at the history of the Champions League, Wolfsburg have been in the final more times than Barcelona. But for me, I watched. Obviously, I've watched both of the semi-finals, and I just don't see anyone beating Barcelona. I think if Wolfsburg made the same mistakes that they did, like they did against Arsenal, then they'll be punished. And they made more mistakes against Arsenal, but wasn't punished for them. But I think if you're doing those mistakes against the likes of Barcelona, you're going to get punished. So it'll be interesting to see how both teams set up for tomorrow's game.
On that article that Shane mentioned about Eidevall, like, he also spoke about the tactical side of trying to limit Wolfsburg a little bit. He spoke about trying to engage their fullbacks a bit further up the pitch, particularly to try and make Jonsdottir play a little bit deeper. Like, when you talk about it, like her performance and her ability to score, what in terms of the possibility for an upset here is key.
Yeah, most definitely, and it's bad because you look at it, like I said, Wolfsburg will probably be going into this game as underdogs against Barcelona, but they've won more Champions League than what Barcelona have, and it's because obviously they've not been in it for the recent years. But I mean, Wolfsburg have got some great players, and I do think her Pop plays as well, because I think against Arsenal, she was having to come so deep to get the ball that you missed her creativity, you missed her drive further up the pitch. You know, she couldn't be in both places at once. But yeah, Wolfsburg need to play to their strengths too. They are a very good team. And like I said, it is a one-off game, but it is the Champions League final. It's probably the biggest one-off game that you can play. So it will be interesting to see the game. I'm excited for it. And yeah, excited to see who comes away winners.
And hopeful that Lucy Bronze, I'm sure selfishly as well, and a lot of England fans looking at that saying back from injury, big performance would be a nice way to round up the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she had the knee surgery, but she's just seen, I don't know if it was more just of a clear out really in her knee. But yeah, I mean, she'll be pushing, she's an ultimate pro, you know, and she'll be pushing to be starting in that game. Also excited to see how Keira Walsh does as well. I think she's been fantastic since she signed for Barcelona. So she, again, for Wolfsburg, she'll be key to stop, because her distribution, the way she can get the ball, turn, face up, you know, and play those passes will be key for Barcelona. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they stop. But fingers crossed, Lucy Bronze, Keira Walsh, if they do play, they have a great game, but they stay fit, obviously, for the World Cup.
But it sounds like you're saying Barcelona either way.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find it hard not to see any other result, but I could be sitting on there again with pie on my face because Wolfsburg absolutely annihilate them. But I just can't see it. From watching the games, I think Barcelona were tight at the back. They were compact. You know, they didn't really have much trouble them. Whereas I think Wolfsburg did on the other hand. But it'll be interesting to see what happens and who comes away with it.
Can you make any argument for Wolfsburg?
No, yeah, I think Wolfsburg. I think if you're looking, they've got the mentality, because they know how to do it. You know, they've been there, they've done it. They've been on the both ends of the spectrum in the final, and they have got fantastic history with the Champions League. They have got great players as well. You know, they have got big players. Like I said, it depends on how much you get pop on the ball as well. Whether you can get her higher up the pitch rather than picking up off the defenders. You know, she's too low. You need her higher up and creating things. I think it will be a lot harder than just, Barcelona just going to turn up and win it. They are two very fantastic teams, but for me, I see a Barcelona win.
And finally, we're eyeing up the possibility of things go well for us in Australia. We might end up playing England, so we're paying some attention to the squad naming this week. And England were one of the first out of the blocks with it. Beth Mead missing, obviously, is a blow. Maya Le Tissier not making it was one of the headlines. And Beth England, full value for her recall? Yeah,
I mean, I commented on Beth's Instagram post because I said finally someone saw sense, because what she's done since going to Tottenham, who were struggling anyway before she went there, but what she's done even more so being there, she scored some huge goals for them. She's basically single-handedly stopped that team from getting relegated, basically, because of the goals that she scored. So she deserved the call up. You know, she's producing the goods, she's banging in the goals, she deserves to be on that plane. Obviously, Maya Le Tissier, I think, is harsh for her to miss out. I think she's had a fantastic season at United, and Serena's come out and said that they see her more as a fullback. But for me, I think she's better than Esme Morgan. I think she's had a better season than Esme Morgan. And obviously then Beth Mead, in all honesty, I don't think she should have really ever been in contention to come back into the squad, purely off the fact of she suffered one of the worst injuries in women's football, in football in general. And she hasn't played for 8 months. You know, I mean, it's not an injury that, you know what, it's ligaments or it's your ankle ligaments, we'll strap it up. It's a serious injury, and there is a high chance of it reoccurring. So I think it's the safest option. As much as obviously any England fan would love Beth Mead to be out there playing, because she is fantastic and she brings so much to the team, you can't, in my opinion, go into a huge tournament like the World Cup off the back of having no match fitness and being out with a 9 month injury with an ACL. So I think it was a tough decision, but I think it was the safest decision and the wise decision to leave her at home. but there's other opportunities now for other players who have been called up to go and show what they can do. Laura Coombs, who's 32 years of age, has been called into the squad for her first senior tournament. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, hopefully we do draw England at some point during the tournament. It'll mean that we're progressing quite well, and that'll be an altogether different conversation, Gilly, which I would look forward to having. So enjoy the football tomorrow. Thanks a million.
Lovely, thank you.
Cheers. Gilly Flaherty on the line there. A few comments coming into us about some of our earlier conversations. Spurs crying out for a keeper, says Super Ken. How does letting in a load of goals be good for you in the long run as a goalie because he's Irish, says Danny Mack, I think in reference to the Spurs crying out for a keeper comment. Shifty Lad says, could Manchester United go and get Kelleher? And good morning to you, Shifty Lad, hope you're well. He might save a penalty or two for them, says Jamie in response. And I mean, sure, isn't your man like the best penalty saver in town now?
Who? Cleaving or De Gea?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he saved one, so that's him.
It, like that's it.
That was the most
back
shocking
broken
thing.
off it now.
Yeah, that was the most surprising element of the final day of the Premier League season. I think David De Gea saving a penalty. Thought he was incapable.
It did appear that way.
Yeah.
8:25. You're watching OTB AM. Myself and Shane are delighted to have your company this morning. Do keep those comments coming into us, particularly ones that we can read out will be amazing, and we're happy to tip the cap to you. We're going to be talking rugby. Quinny is standing by to assess that Ireland training squad announced during the week. Some interesting comments from Ronan Agar in the paper this morning as well that we'll put to him as in terms of the pecking order for the number 10 shirt. First of all, Nathan chatting to Stephen Bradley yesterday about the incredible reaction of Cork City fans to a few people who directed horrible chants towards his family during the week.
Cork City came out very quickly and unequivocally condemned what had happened. What are your thoughts on the response from Cork, from the FAI, from the authorities over the last week?
Cork as a whole, as a city, have been fantastic. So many of the fans have emailed the club, written letters to myself and or text me privately, and they've been brilliant, as the country as a whole has been. We've had politicians on, we've had people up and down the country from fans of every club contact me, so a massive thank you to them. We know that the game in this country is followed by brilliant people, and I know there's a small minority that you just can't change and won't change, and that's unfortunate. But the response from everyone, the Gardaí, the FAI, everyone involved has been brilliant.
Talk about the coaching.
27 minutes past 8, OTB AM. That is the whispering voice in the background of one Alan Quinlan. Quinny, good morning to you.
Dulcet morning, tones. Lads. How are you?
Dulcet Quinny tones there.
We're having our pre-interview
chat.
Production chat. How's life?
We're scrambling for rugby.
We're
a lot of egg chasing, hasn't there?
Well, there was a lot of trying to get your mother to come on the show this morning, but
just looking at the video here and Quinny's.
She's not for turning.
She's going to kill me,
to
be honest.
There's the wisdom in the family went all in her direction.
She was walking up the street in Tipperary town the other day and people were shouting across the street, go home, Mary Quinlan, go home. You're gone for the last week. But asked for a bit of harmless fun, really. I just was surprised that she was gone back into Thomond Park on Monday night. Yeah. And I thought it was a laugh. I couldn't believe the tweet went so crazy, and obviously a lot of people got involved. And look, bit of harmless humour. I don't normally do that now, to be honest, but I just thought she's a great character, really, and it was just a little bit of fun. And a great Munster supporter as well for a long time. I admire her. She never stopped when I stopped.
Roger's a big fan. When he was on the other day,
he was always very close. Well, all our parents, in fairness, Roger's mum was a lovely mum, as all the other parents are. Sheila O'Connell is a great character. Donica's mum, Mary, so many others, and they love it. And we've often asked about people often ask about our kind of time with Munster and how special it was. Special for our parents as well. They had a great bond. They had great fun. Frankie Sheehan used to always say, about his own parents, Catherine and Frank, that they had the time of their lives, really. Do you know what I mean? My dad, who passed away a few years ago, he never really went anywhere in his life. He grew up on a farm very young. I think he was working full time at home on the farm where we grew up. Didn't get a chance to travel. It was hard work all his life, and suddenly, he got the opportunity to go to France and different rugby matches, and loved it. And they all had great fun. So that's a really important part. It's the same with the current Munster group. Their parents have kind of started that bond and journey, and Leinster parents, Connacht parents, Ulster parents, and they start to meet up and get to know the other provincial parents, if you like, the rivalries, and they go to Irish matches together. So that's a really important part of sport as well. And sometimes we forget it, the people who make the sacrifices. And yeah, my mum was a great character, and she's always supported not just me, but my brothers and sisters as well, going to sport. She often works and had to go to 2 matches in the evenings or 3 matches. She was dropping, my brothers to other games, GAA games, and trying to get home and get dinners made and all that. So look, that's really important. And Rog, obviously it was lovely to see his mum after the final as well, because Joan hadn't been that well. So sometimes we forget that, but they've had a wonderful time as well.
At that group, they're still obviously in regular contact, or
regular contact. Yeah, my mum organised a trip recently to Ballacastine in Limerick Junction, the hotel there, and they had a big get together. The parents stayed the night and had a sing song, drank a few bottles of wine, and that's lovely for them, because they've become great friends. So, and it happens, it evolves in sport. And as I said, the current group of players with Ireland and with the different provinces, that's nice that they can get to meet each other as well.
Can your mum enjoy watching Munster more now than when you were playing? Like, were there nerves when you were playing?
Probably, I probably, because maybe she was, obviously most parents would be nervous about how well their child plays, or whether, in my case, getting into trouble and giving away penalties or whatever. And Nigel Owens put up a tweet, obviously, and you know what, she talked to every referee and it was nice, because that was kind of funny that you have your mum talking to the referee and saying, don't take any nonsense.
Were you ever like, oh man, will you stop?
Don't take any nonsense from my son. It was usually after the game, obviously, but it's nice to see that, and it's a different side of the game. It's a little bit lighter, obviously, and but last weekend, a lot of these people, Adrian, and I don't want to be going on about Munster again. I'll have comments flying in saying people are sick of talking about Munster all week, but there was people there, and I said it on Monday's show, that I've seen him at the very start. They've had a lot of misfortune and kind of misery around the team, and lack of success, but they've stuck in, they've still supported, and that's lovely to see them getting rewarded. It was an opportunity really that kind of came out of nowhere, when 6 weeks ago that wasn't really on the card. So lovely for them. And I kind of sat back afterwards, and even Saturday night, just looking at people, and it just gave them such a lift, a lot of the older people. So it was lovely to see that, and it's a good story.
Who's your mother's favourite rugby pundit?
Quinlan?
I don't know, to be honest. She's a big fan of Rogers, all right. They always had a great connection. So anytime he's ever, she doesn't say a bad word about anyone. It's funny, like it's like that. She wouldn't criticise anyone.
Does she follow your work?
A little bit, I think, yeah. She'd obviously listen to me when I'm doing the commentary and matches and stuff, but...
Or would she be on to you about that? Like, would she?
Not at all, no. Listen, if I did the worst commentary ever, she'd tell me you were great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Would you have got told
Typical Irish mum, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you did any disciplinary issues during a match when you were playing, would you have got told off at home?
Not really. A little.
They'd have been saying, Jesus, you should have doubled down on that. That's
yeah, exactly.
So we haven't had you in since the squad was named, obviously, and I was sort of mindful of the fact that obviously you tend to, with an extended squad like that, it'll be reduced down further again, but we tend to look at the players obviously that weren't included in it. And I know that chatting to you before, we were chatting only a couple of weeks back about who would be the contenders for the URC Player of the Year, and you had singled out John Klein as somebody who would fit in that regard. Obviously himself, Hodnett, Frisch, and a few more miss out. It spoke to me the reality that this game was picked on March the 18th after the England game.
Probably. I think those players would certainly have been in the minds of Andy Farrell and the other Irish coaches, and they would take note about what's happened. I think obviously there's a system there, and there's a structure, and there's calls, and there's the way Ireland play, and it is different. So it's a short period of time for people to get up to speed if they haven't been in the squad regularly. So I think that probably came against newer guys like, well, John Klein hasn't been there in a couple of years, Anton Frisch, Shane Daly has been in and out of the squads in recent times and the last couple of years, but I think, look, it's a short period of time. To be fair to the people who've been picked, they've all delivered. They've all consistently been high performers, and I was very disappointed for Jordan Larmour because I just think he's a wonderful player.
Come on so much in the last 12 months again, hasn't he?
He's had an horrendous time with injuries, and he's a special player that you just can't really analyse. Is he going to step off his left, his right? I know, he hasn't had a consistent run even when he's come back, and
Jimmy O'Brien
Jimmy O'Brien has been so consistent, so wonderful player. But you can't have everyone in there. Robert Balakoon was someone I've always I love people that are a little bit different, and the difference with him is the gas, the pace. So there's players that are disappointed. I was trying to look through the squad and say, well, is it 42 or 43?
2.
There's 9 going to be dropping out of here, and you're kind of clipping 1 or 2 in each position, maybe, you know what I mean?
Have you clipped,
when you go back row centres, out halves, scrum halves, that's 4, props 5, hookers 6, second row 7, about 8. It's broken down into 8 little blocks. So
have you an idea
talking
who you're
about
clipping?
1, possibly 2. Well, it's not really. Look, if you go to back 3, if we go through every name, Mac Hansen is a definite. Hugo Keenan, James Lowe, Jimmy O'Brien. So if you look at the other 4 that have been picked there, you've Keith Earls, Jacob Stockdale, Calvin Nash. The other 3, sorry. So
which one of those is most likely, of those 3 is most likely to make it?
Keith Earls has given himself a great chance, probably coming back and reminded people. Very
there, done it.
Very well trusted, great experience, obviously. A position like Keith now would be very important for him. For him, very important that he has a really good pre-season in these camps and looks sharp. If he can be cutting it up in training, looking really in great condition, then he go. Then with the coaches, when he's someone who they trust, they know what he can do. If they see that sharpness, then he has a bigger advantage, obviously, over Calvin Nash and Jacob Stockdale. Jacob Stockdale was a starter when you think back under the Joe Schmidt era, the Grand Slam success in 18, the try scoring he was doing, but other parts of his game needed to develop. They've probably gotten better defensively in the kick chase and all that kind of stuff, but we haven't seen him being as prolific with Ulster or since then. So it's the same for every one of them. Anyway, you want to, I think Calvin Nash is someone who will probably bounce into that training squad and go feel better about himself, feel confident, given the consistency in the last few weeks and the way he's finished the season. So it's very difficult and it's a long way out. Centres, they're not going to bring 5 centres. So you think Aki, Henshaw and Ringaras are most likely going to go. I think the interesting thing with Jack Crowley now from a fly half position is they may look at him as a possibility at 12, a reality of being at 12, an option at 12. Because you've got Ross Byrne, Jack Crowley, Kieran Frawley and Johnny Sexton. Kieran Frawley can do that job as well, for sure. So there's a lots of...
Can I stop you on that one particularly? Because as always, when he's writing in the Examiner, we've something to put to you, and he's had an interesting, Ronan Lagarde, an interesting point to make on the number 10 pecking order in his article this morning. And I'll read here directly from it. He says, he has moved ahead of Ross Byrne. Jack Crowley has moved ahead of Ross Byrne in the pecking order. Sport doesn't wait for anyone. Because of what Crowley did against Leinster at the Aviva, because of how he played in the final in an away setting in Cape Town, his development has been accelerated. We're no longer in a 50-50 conversation on the backup to Sexton. Crowley is ahead in that pecking order now.
If you look back to 6-7 weeks ago when Munster played the Stormers in South Africa and the Sharks in South Africa, Jack Crowley didn't perform well in both those games. Ben Healy came on in both of them and made a difference. He would have been disappointed. He's still very young, learning the ropes, but undoubted talent now being fulfilled. He's a fantastic player. He's a great personality about him. There's a little bit of niggle about him. He came off in that Stormers game and I think he was kicking water bottle. He was frustrated with himself that he made some mistakes. You handle the ball 60, 70, 80 times in a game as a fly half or whatever. I don't know the exact number, but you're over 50, 60 times. There's going to be a couple of errors in there, either kicks from all players, even at the very top level. Obviously, when you have a load of experience and gone through, big matches and big moments in your career, and you get to a stage where you become mature, the mistakes or the composure word is there around the fly half a lot more. So they need to learn on the run, really. So it wasn't long ago we were talking about Ross Byrne being, after coming on against France, team looking really comfortable, loads of consistency around his performance, the big kick in November against Australia. So it's kind of fluctuating a little bit, and that's what we want. But I think they're different, and I think Crowley's ceiling is probably can be higher because he's a real running out half as well. You saw the break that he made in that final against the Stormers. Yankees just gets him close to the line. It was the one where Evan Roos got yellow carded. And Roger knows more than me about out halves, but I think, look, it's he
doesn't have the experience. If you're making the case for Ross Byrne, he has a little bit been there and a little bit done it in an Ireland shirt.
Correct, and probably
most recently
looks more composed. But the finish of the season from Jack Crowley, and lots of big performances during the season. I picked out Stormers and Sharks, and I think if you had Jack on, he'd probably say I was disappointed there. But he's a brilliant player, and he's unbelievably grounded, and he has a little edge to him, and he's a real running fly half as well. The kick to the corner there for the Dermot Barron try, he got everything out of that, and it was a nervy kind of one. Oh God, is it going to go dead? So his game has really grown, I think.
To ask another way, if you're naming the 23 tomorrow for a World Cup game, who's in it? Are both of them in it?
You're going to get me lynched by the Leinster Brigade, really. Well, obviously, if Johnny Sexton is fit and it's a World Cup selection against Scotland or South Africa, he's your starting fly half because he's been brilliant, and we hope he has a good pre-season and recovers and gets that fitness level back that will be needed.
In the 22 shirt is,
given the end of the season, Jack Crowley probably. But that can change very quickly. They'll have little mini matches and stuff, and a lot of it will be down to how they're performing in training. They'll get opportunities in the warm-up games, so it could fluctuate and change very quickly. Again, if Ross Byrne, has a big moment like Crowley, well, he's still ahead. So we want to see that pressure from both of them, and I think even what happened in November with Jack Crowley starting against Australia, that kind of inspired Ross Byrne to kick on and lift his game as well. So we can't forget what Ross Byrne did against Racing and Gloucester and all these games. Okay, some of them, the Gloucester game, particularly the one at home, there was a second string, but he was brilliant in Europe for Leinster as well, so can't forget that. But it's an interesting one, and it's one that we want that depth. We'd love if the two of them, we were splitting hairs between them going forward.
And look at maybe a scenario where they're fighting out to be the starting 10 for the World Cup.
And Kieran Frawley hasn't really got that run. He's kind of maybe the utility kind of one that can play in a number of positions, which he can. So I don't know how he feels. Am I an out half? Do I want to nail my colours to the mast there, or still do this utility role? And dare I say it, everybody'd love to see Joey Carberry his opportunities around this World Cup are probably gone unless something drastic happens there and he's called in, he trains with him and does well. But he's still quite a young man, and hopefully he can find a little bit of a sparkle going forward and get back on track and probably see and understand what he has to do to to reignite his career again, because it's been sad to see
on a human level. He must be going through the ringer.
You've seen this guy who's starting in France last year and playing with Ireland and being right on, being in New Zealand, all that kind of stuff, and suddenly he's doing the water. Messages from Munster. It's hard to see. If you're talking about the other positions, again, most of them are nailed on. You know what I mean? I'm not sure how many props. Will they bring 5? Or will they bring the 6? It's probably going to be 5. They'll reduce the hookers. There's 4 hookers there. I think they'll bring 2 hookers. To get in another hooker and call someone up is easy logistically with a flight to France. So will they bring 2 scrum halves or 3? Probably 2, I think. Again, it's easy to call someone in at short notice. If there was an injury in training, even on Thursday, you can have someone there Thursday night. It's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see, will they add any players, or will they just limit this to 42 guys training and there's no extras kind of coming in, the way they have would have had a 6 Nations squad, and then there's 6 or 7 guys in the training camp with them. So that'd be interesting to see if there was 1 or 2 positions, but it's a big one for Ian Henderson as well. I think I looked at his name. This is just names that kind of jumped out when you write down the squad. He's really important. That he has a good run with these pre-season camps as well, and gets back on track. Disappointing end to the season for Ulster, obviously. His season has been blighted by injury. Undoubted quality. And Joe McCarthy, it's a big one for him. I think he's a brilliant player, deserves to be in there, and offers a different sort of physicality and brute force, and he's only going to get better. He's very young. The back rows, then people were kind of raising their eyebrows about just 1-7 in there, which is,
well, that's the case for Hodnett, is it?
It's the case for Hodnett or Scott Penny. Scott Penny was brilliant during the season as well. So Nick Timoney would be disappointed.
Who's ahead between the two?
I don't know, because it probably Scott Penny, because he's probably been in there more and trained with him, so he understands the systems. And when you think the system, it's about where the shape of players on attack, where they're running. Are they staying on the edges? Is it a 1-3-3-1 scenario with the props, second rows in the midfield, holding back rows in the wings and all that, on phase play and all that kind of stuff. So Ireland have a system there that's different, and they probably don't have the time now to start upskilling people as regards learn your role,
work with what you have,
which seems like it's not rocket science. It's rugby, that you should be able to go into a squad fairly new, learn the role, but it's running it, the repetitive. And the big plus from what we've seen in Ireland the last while has been the accuracy around their passing and stuff like that. So no real surprises there. I think the uncapped players, Jamie Osborne coming in there, he's a very, very good player as well. So I don't think we're going to see any surprises as regards, at this stage, the bulk of the squad is what it is. Nobody's going to come out of the outside that group and probably end up starting.
What emphasis do you have to place on experience then, Quinny? You look at those uncapped players, Nash, Osborne, Frawley and Tom Stewart, does that make decision making easier, like the likes of, say, Earls versus Nash, if you were to put it between those two? Well, do you pick the more experienced player because he's played at World Cups? In the history of what I've seen, you won't see too many tweaks or changes from nearly all of us. Could probably go close to picking that squad. But the really important part here is, and I believe Andy Farrell will be the same, and I've seen it before in the squads I've been in, it's not just on the rugby field. So I probably got in an 07 squad based on my fitness levels. I came back from a very serious knee injury the year before. I struggled with my fitness. I had a cruciate done. I ended up going to New Zealand at the end of the season, but then the following season my kind of fitness levels went to a different level, if you like. For me personally, I kind of made a lot of sacrifice about diet, alcohol consumption, all that stuff that was non-existent really, and I really had an unbelievable run fitness wise. And I remember doing fitness sessions in Poland pre that World Cup, and I was killing it. I was 33 at the time, and I was just, my scores were unbelievable, and it was taken into account that here's a guy who was probably
you think the career's over and that they're
leadership
they're at
factor
an
as
age.
well, though.
So that's my point that I have in my head. I think someone like Keith having a brilliant pre-season, and when they're doing the fitness scores, which will come into account, and the all that stuff, that's where you can win a few meters for yourself in the coaches' minds, where obviously they look at a player and they say, this guy is in unbelievable shape. So, for Calvin Nash and they can win a little bit if they obviously look after themselves. And the older you get as a player, you realise your pre-season, the holiday situation is great. You have your 3 or 4 weeks off. You head off to the sun. Some people with their partners, others if they're not in relationships, they go away with the lads, the younger ones, and it's how you look after yourself. And historically, at the very start, carnage for 2 weeks back when we started going away like that. But the older you get, it's how you look after yourself in the off season, and you come back and you kind of, it's easier to get to a high level of fitness then. So it's about looking after yourself, and Keith will know that. I think the last couple of years his training regime has changed, and I think they call him Paul McGrath in Munster, that he picks his training days, but he looks after himself. It doesn't mean that you won't get injured. So for any players in there, if they, someone like Cian Prendergast in the back row, like does he go, well, the inevitable is going to happen here. It's great to be in the initial squad, but the Jack Conans, Caelan Doris, Peter O'Mahony, Josh van der Fleer, they're in, and the same as Gavin Coombs, brilliant finish to the season. Do they kind of go, well, buy into the narrative that they're not going to be selected because they have to find something different, a little bit of aggression, take control of the situation when they're training, and also turn up in great shape. If I was talking to any of these guys, I'd say enjoy your holidays rest wise and mentally and all that, but keep in shape. This is a big opportunity here come September, and you can win a coach over by doing something on a fitness test, or it's not going to be the determining factor. But all these guys are going to have to really come back in great shape, not start and end up in great shape. Come back,
hit the ground running.
Really.
We'd love to see Keith Earls. That's, I think, would be the feel good story of the year if he could get in there. I saw her tweet last night, you're losing your Red 78 partner in crime.
Yeah, Niamh is obviously, because of her job and stuff, she's compromised a little bit now, timing wise, all that stuff. So yeah, we'll be looking for someone. It's been great. It's been really enjoyable. We've had loads of fan engagement this year, and obviously, the end has been super. The start of the season, where it's a bit doom and gloom, and they're part of a kind of a journey really, and there's a bit of optimism with the new coaches come in. So the end was brilliant. Niamh was wonderful. She was great and great insight. So
she's class. She's so full of energy. I met her on the street after the Ireland-England game at the Men's Six Nations, and obviously everybody was buzzing or whatever, and did a great enthusiasm obviously for what was to come. We weren't to know at that point, but in terms of the Women's Six Nations and that, but she had
a tough period,
tough time, but like she's got a great natural enthusiasm. I can see how she brings players along with her, and she's very personable, and I'm sure has as evidenced in the Red 78 got
she's
a good
very enthused about
the
changes that are happening in the women's game. It's been well documented, the shortcomings, if you like, and people still talking a lot about that, and it was a tough Six Nations, a lot of young players, but I believe her. She's really enthused about change and how they can get better, and how things are changing in the game. So it was hard for her as a coach. I just couldn't bear to think what it's like. You're getting those tough games, but she's plenty of enthusiasm, and she was great throughout the last 2 seasons.
Quirky 1980 says, wouldn't that make a brilliant book or documentary? Stories from the parents of a team like that. Munster, the away trips must have some stories, which is a fantastic idea. Thanks a million.
Cheers, thanks lads.
We will be talking to you. I'm sure there'll be more stuff to chat about down the tracks.
Yeah, we'll be back. the squad will be up and running in the next few weeks. So
exactly,
a little bit of a quiet period. So thanks for coming in. Loads of comments coming in as well about all sorts of different stuff. We're getting given out on loads of fronts, Shane.
Good, yeah.
More rugby please, less football, says Tony. We like rugby, says Joe. We don't all like rugby, points out somebody else. Leinster win that final with Crowley, says Hoggy. When will the Rugby World Cup be over, wonders Schreider, who's obviously had enough of all this. And yeah, plenty more as well, besides lots coming in about the football. And all sorts. It is OTB AM, and we're here with Gillette Labs. You can get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night edition is available now, and we're going to turn our attention to football. We're going to talk to Daniel Harris, who's standing by. Daniel, good morning to you.
Hiya.
Thanks a million for jumping on. We've an FA Cup final to chat about, and we'll do that in a minute. But first of all, if you don't mind, could we start with your piece that you've written in The Guardian yesterday evening? It appeared online about anti-Semitism in football, specifically about inaction, I think, around anti-Semitism in football. It's a very personal story. It's extremely well written and hopefully challenging, I guess, for lots of football goers.
Yeah, I think that what happened was a few weeks ago, I wrote a story. I came by some anti-Semitism in the WhatsApp group of the Ashburton Army, and who are an Arsenal fan group who have been involved with the club a little bit. The club are helping them in a bid to improve the atmosphere. And as a Jew, and I say this in the piece, you're never really surprised when you come across anti-Semitism. So to explain that, my grandmother survived the Holocaust, so did my grandfather. And when that happens, I think Jews of my parents' generation were raised to see anti-Semitism everywhere, as you might imagine, because of what had happened to their parents and what they grew up with. So as a Jew, you're never really surprised when you come across anti-Semitism, because it is in a lot of places, and you've kind of been raised to be on the lookout for it. Like, there's always be kind of, in Jewish homes, you'd know which celebrities were thought to be anti-Semitic, for example. And I'm sure that all different minorities have their versions of this too. But so I wasn't surprised when I came by these messages when they were sent to me. But what I was surprised by were how many of them there were, the real ferocity of them. Like, some of the stuff was so specific that it really, it burned your eyes. And I said to the editor that I was dealing with at the time, I've heard about these messages, I haven't got them yet, someone's sending them to me. And I know that he thought what I thought. He thought, yeah, whatever, there'll be some borderline stuff. And what actually happened was there was loads of stuff. And and it wasn't just how much of it there was, as I said, but the ferocity of it, and also the apparent lack of interventions by almost everyone on that group. And so that was why I wrote about it, and then that was why I wanted to write about anti-Semitism more generally, because, as I also say in the piece, it is much easier being Jewish in the UK today than it is being a lot of other things. And I understand that. I understand that very well as someone who's married to a British Ghanaian. In fact, yeah, I thought it was something I thought I understood before, but I absolutely did not understand it until I started seeing my wife a long time ago now. So I think that's a really important point to make, but nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that if you support Arsenal in particular, but not just Arsenal, something you have to factor into your football support is the presence of anti-Semitism because of the Tottenham connection. I know this also happens, it also affects other London clubs, and it's also important to say that Arsenal, I know, are doing great work to try and combat this. But the idea that this stuff exists in society, which it does and doesn't exist in football, is obviously nonsense. But we could then say, well, it's a social problem, so what's football got to do with it? But what I want to say is football is it's incredible social force. In some ways, there's nothing in the world that is like football. Genuinely, there is nothing that crosses boundaries of social boundaries, religious boundaries, borders of sexuality, borders of sex. Any kind of border you can put up, football has crossed that. And I don't think you can say that about anything, because the other, I guess, two massive pan-global things are religion, and obviously we know there are a few different ones of those, and music is quite regional. So football is that thing, and if football is that thing, then we should be using football to make the world a better place. And not just for Jews either, but for all the different minorities who have felt othered in some way by the football machine.
It's that point is worthy of a thesis that I'm sure has been done. It's worthy of an hour-long conversation. The point about the blank canvas nature of sport, and we are guaranteed are going to get comments here saying, sports show, stick to the sport, but I am absolutely on board with that idea of it being a blank canvas for the exposure of the brilliant things and the fallibilities of society, and the opportunity to use sport as a mechanism to tackle some of those things. Can you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned about Arsenal, but about the role of Tottenham in it as well, Daniel, because you bring up a really interesting point in the article about the issue around non-Jewish Tottenham fans referring to themselves as the Y word, and the, I guess, cyclical nature in some regards of that being then used against them as non-Jewish people as a term of abuse. And it's a really complex circle, and I wonder about that, and I wonder about the role that Tottenham have to play in that in terms of an appetite to stamp it out.
Yeah, just to go back to one thing you said before that, you said that people say just stick to the football. So I think it's important to say that deciding not to talk about politics is a political decision. So it is not possible to keep politics out of football. Every time you have three people in a situation, there is politics. And when you have, say, the World Cup, you have nation states singing anthems, wearing colours of their flags, competing at stuff. Like, that is political. Like, nations are involved. So I just wanted to make that point. So opting not to talk about politics when you're talking about sport is itself a political decision. But on specifically to do with Tottenham, I'm someone, as people who listen to the show know, like, I go to football. So I understand how football crowds work and how football identity works. And so what you've got is you've had a situation where Spurs have been decided by other people that they're a Jewish club. For what it's worth, when I was a kid growing up in North London in the 80s and 90s, I went to the biggest Jewish primary school, went to the biggest Jewish secondary school. Tottenham were the best supported club. I mean, I guess I think that might well have changed now in North London. I think it's probably Arsenal seems to be more widely supported, but Spurs were categorised as this Jewish club. At the time, they were owned by Irving Scholar, who was Jewish. They were owned by Alan Sugar, who was Jewish. So that sort of that prompted some rival supporters, I'd say particularly the other London clubs, but not just other London clubs. I've had words with people about the City United as well, but I'd say mainly London clubs, to say, well, Spurs are a Jewish club, and then give Spurs anti-Semitic abuse as though all of them were Jewish. And whether that's meant, whether Spurs are an avatar for Jews or it's just an opportunity to say the stuff that you're not really meant to say, who knows? But Spurs are, as you say, termed as Yids and then what's happened is Spurs have taken that word and called it and applied it to themselves. In, I guess, the phrase that would generally be used is they're reclaiming the word, except that word isn't theirs to reclaim. For what it's worth, it's not been a massive term of anti-Semitic abuse in my experience. The stuff people are likely to say, the anti-Semitic abuse I've had in my life, tends not to reference that word, but in a footballing context, that is the word. And it was very prominent in that Ashburton Army WhatsApp group that I referred to before. And what you end up with is because we know, as you mentioned, the cyclical nature of football chanting. Team A chants one thing, Team B chants something worse if they can think of it, and we go round and round. So what you get is you now get Spurs, non-Jewish Spurs fans, calling themselves Yids, almost to bait anti-Semitic abuse out of other clubs. I see it watching United as well, where people will sing "Where's Your Famous Munich Song" in order to sort of bait Munich abuse out of other people. Because the Munich abuse came first, but then it becomes one group's ability to act, whether it's disaster chanting or anti-Semitic chanting or racist chanting, becomes something that their rivals use against them to incite them to do it again. So what you end up with is non-Jewish Tottenham fans singing "We Are the Yids" or "Yid Army" or whatever in order to incite anti-Semitic abuse out of other non-Jewish fans. And at the same time, Jews are expected to believe that no Tottenham fan who's chanting those words is secretly thinking, this is kind of cute, isn't it? I can go to the game and I can chant this. I can't do it anywhere else. And that is one of the great things about football. I appreciate that. And I say this in the piece, that you are able to feel feelings that you can't feel anywhere else. You're able to sing songs that you can't sing anywhere else. And it's that off-key humour that you also find in the changing room or dormitories or classrooms or whatever. But we're expected to believe that no Tottenham fan is enjoying the chanting of Yid Army because it involves Yid Army or whatever. And that itself also feels like, I can't stretch my credulity that far.
Supporters groups have a lot to play in this, Daniel, don't they? You mentioned the Ashburton Army there. For people unfamiliar, they're an Arsenal supporters group, but people unfamiliar with how these chants sometimes are arranged, a lot of these supporters groups just meet up in a pub, come up with chants, decide what's good, decide what's not. Maybe tell us what, like the Ashburton Army, a lot of their chants have been problematic, let's just say, in recent years.
I don't know. I don't think it's an Ashburton Army thing. I don't really want to focus on them because it's this wide problem. I could easily have written the piece and said, well, I want these people to be found and punished. But it's not about vengefulness, and it's not about specific people. It's about these things are happening now. What global steps can we do to make it better across the board? It's not about singling out the Ashburton Army, who, as far as I understand it, also, in order to join the Ashburton Army, you have to be involved in social action. So they're also people are doing good things, and Arsenal are doing good things. And I don't know how. I mean, I know how football chants sometimes work. Sometimes people sit there and write them, or sometimes something happens at the game and it's just a response to what's happened immediately. So there are all sorts of different ways in which this stuff works. But I think the point is more, we have this problem. It's a problem in society and it's a problem in football. What do we do to try and stop it being a problem in football, while at the same time hoping that by stopping it being a problem in football, then it will also filter through to society, while also society has these other things to do. So rather than becoming the vicious circle that we talked about before, it becomes a virtuous circle.
Yeah, I think your article has done some service, let's say, and I'm sure that I hope it's the start of a conversation as well in a wider scale. Let's talk a little bit about the FA Cup final. I read it yesterday. It was the first time Manchester Derby for an FA Cup final, and I had to think to myself, that can't be right. This source is not credible. But it turns out it is. Earlier than usual kickoff, Daniel, is that 3 o'clock kickoff to do with like 30,000 fans from each club at a neutral venue, and if it spills in a bit later, it might spill over a bit later?
I guess that is probably a security decision, a police decision, in the way that, I remember in the 90s, United used to play, every time United played Leeds, kicked off about 7:30 in the morning. And I guess, it's back to that, the traditional time. It will, let's be real, it will probably be edgy because it's a Manchester United Manchester City Cup final. There's a lot on the line, and people will be feeling edgy about this. I mean, so you will expect there to be people discussing these things with rival supporters. On
the face of it, obviously, it's City's inevitable drive to the treble, and it can't be stopped. And then you sort of start to pick away at that, and you look at the two managers, for example, whose careers have interlocked, and you look at the recent games. I mean, and it's hard. I don't know what you're reading into the 6-3 in, was it October, and then the more recent United winning the league. Is there a thread from that game, from one game to the next game to tomorrow, or is this just a total outlier given the nature of the game?
I'd say the 6-3 is partly an outlier because United had only just started under Ten Hag, and Casemiro, they didn't have Casemiro for that game. Varane got injured in the first half. That would be one way of looking at that game, to just totally dismiss it for that reason. But, I mean, that was by far the best any team's played against United this season. And until City sort of started going on this run over the last couple of months, I thought like that was by far the best Premier League performance of the season. And United, I said they didn't have Casemiro in that game, they didn't. But they also did have Lisandro Martinez, and he did find it difficult against Haaland, but it's also the case that I think it was 4-0 at half-time that game. Without Martinez, it would have been more than 4-0. So it would be silly not to notice how well City played that day, and to know that they are capable of playing that well again. On the other hand, as you say, by the time United beat them at Old Trafford, United were a much better team. They had Casemiro, Garnacho was integrated, someone that they could bring on to change things. I think I'd have more of a sneak for United if Martinez was fit. I think not having him makes a massive difference, not just defensively, because they have actually been okay defensively recently. Although I must say, I'm generally not that worried about Victor Lindelof. I think at his best, and not next to Maguire, he's a good player. He's not a player as good as United should have, but he's a good player. But because he lacks both pace and strength, it makes him a problem against Erling Haaland, I think. So I obviously City are big favourites, but United have players that can hurt any team. but they will need to play really well to win, and City probably don't need to play that well to win.
Would you expect United to copy what happened in that 2-1 win at Old Trafford that Adrian mentioned, Daniel? Because they kind of, I guess, corrected some errors that they'd made in the previous game. They stopped defending deep, or they actually focused, defending deep, attacked quickly, and didn't really press City too high up the pitch as well. So maybe that's one way in which you can beat City. There aren't many ways to beat them, but surely that game is one example Ten Hag can use.
I think the thing about that game that surprised me at the time was because United lost to City at the in that 6-3, and it felt like Ten Hag just went into that game and thought, well, we'll play our way and impose our way of playing, and that will be all right. And that obviously didn't work. United were nowhere near good enough to do that. Then I thought that when United played City at home, he wouldn't play Fred. He wouldn't play Christian Eriksen, because in order to compete with City, you need to compete physically and you need to be able to run. And a midfield of Bruno, Christian Eriksen and Casemiro, I think, doesn't have enough legs to take on City. So I think one of the questions Ten Hag has to answer is what the composition of his midfield is. And he might decide to play Christian Eriksen again. I think that would be a mistake. Wembley's a big pitch, and I'd say that they need more legs in midfield. He might then decide to play Christian Eriksen and Fred, and then play Bruno in one of the wide positions, which itself might depend on whether Antony's fit. I'm pretty sure I heard him say, Ten Hag say on Sunday, he thought he would be, and he always plays if he is. So you might decide to pack them to just defend the box, which United tried to do when they lost to Guardiola's Barcelona in the 2011 Champions League final. They might decide to defend the box and just hit on the break, in which case you probably want some fast players up front, which, you might then play Garnacho, not Sancho, which I don't think will happen. Or you might think, well, you can't just sit there and wait to concede. You need to try and get in amongst City and try and win the ball high up the pitch, which again is something that Fred needs, that you want Fred for. But I think the thing about City that's interesting to me that seems to have changed is that if you think about all of Guardiola's previous teams, they've all been possession teams. And what's happened over the course of the season, more by accident than by design, it kind of feels, is that City have changed from becoming a possession team to a possession team and a power team. Because obviously they signed Haaland, who wasn't particularly a player. I think Guardiola wanted that kind of centre forward. It was just that a centre forward that good became available, and he was that kind of centre forward. You have to sign him. But then he's ended up with 3 good defenders at the back, and he's never really had good defenders in defence before, which sounds ludicrous to say. I just found it funny after they beat Chelsea when they got the trophy. He said that sort of the development this year has been defenders you can defend, and made me laugh. The foremost tactical mind of his generation and many generations, suddenly realising that was a significant thing in a football team. But it is significant when you don't have Busquets, Iniesta and Xavi and Messi to get your defence out of trouble, or to mean that you can't get at that defence. But so he's got 3 blokes at the back who are big and strong and fast: Diaz, Akanji and Walker. And then now in front of them, he's got Rodri and Stones, who are 2 more big lads. And the thing that I felt watching City was the way that they play engaged me in a more visceral manner than against Madrid. They engaged me in a more visceral manner than any Guardiola team has before, because I'm used to watching power teams, really. Fergie's best teams were mainly power teams. Klopp's teams are power teams as well. And personally, that's what I want in a football team. I want them to be strong and fast and hard and vicious. And watching them against Madrid, which was an incredible performance, they didn't just pass around Madrid, they ran over them. They didn't just run around them, they ran over them. And that is something that we haven't really seen from a Guardiola team before, and something that United will have to contend with, because they're not a particularly big team.
In a word, United or City?
Come on.
City, obviously.
I know City. I know City are favourites. I know City are likely to win. And when I said to my wife, I'm afraid it might be our anniversary, but I'm afraid I've got to nip off to Wembley for a few hours. I know on that day, I know what I'm likely to see. But I'm not going to sit here and say on the day before the cup final and say, yeah, City. I'm afraid I don't have that in my DNA.
And in about the same number of words, are United getting Mason Mount and Harry Kane?
It looks like there's a good chance they'll get Mason Mount. I think he's a good player. If he's being signed for the squad and they're also in sort of a faster, younger Eriksen, then fair enough. If he was being signed with no other midfield player, then I guess I would have two questions. I think United really need someone who's a bit more physical than Mount, someone who can take the ball off the defence and bring it forward. And I mean, that's really what Ten Hag wants. His ideal signing is still Frenkie de Jong. Problem being, he's a bit of a unicorn. And if you can't get him, who do you get who's like him? No one really. So I think that, and also, is Mason Mount good enough? As in, I know he's a good player, but in order to compete with City, and that is the benchmark currently, you probably need to be able to engage them in a battle, and you need stronger players than them, or better players than them, or both. And I'm not sure Mount is either of those things, even though I think he's good. But he's someone that United want. He's someone that apparently Arteta likes, that Klopp likes. These guys know ball. They know ball better than me, better than all of us listening to this show. So I have to respect that. And at 24, he's got a lot of improving to do. I like his big game temperament. I like his competitive personality. I like his dedication. So I think that he'd be a good buy, but I'd want someone who would start the big games ahead of him, who was stronger and faster and better. Harry Kane, I'm sure United will try and get Harry Kane. I'm sure they want to try and find out what the lie of the land is with Harry Kane early doors. They don't want to get involved in a row with a wrangle with Daniel Levy that lasts the entirety of the summer. It will probably need Harry Kane to burn some bridges. Whether he's prepared to do that or not, I don't know. But I think that he will want to stay in England because he wants Shearer's record to mitigate any lack of trophies that he might end his career without. Do you end your career with a lack of trophies? Without that? I don't know. But whichever it is. So I think that he'd probably be their first choice of striker because he's someone can come in and be brilliant from the off and change it. But whether that is possible or not, who knows?
We shall see. Daniel, thanks a million.
No worries. Have a good weekend. Cheers for having me, lads.
Thanks a lot. It's time now for the cash machine.
Off the Balls Cash Machine.
All right, congrats to Aidan Maloney from Cork, who became our first June winner when he answered our call yesterday, and it's a great way to start the bank holiday, of course, for him. And someone else is going to be celebrating in the sunshine in style today, as we have a guaranteed winner of €30,000 today. And taking part is easy. Every day we're going to give you a new amount. You can take note of it, enter, and at 3 o'clock today, which is June the 2nd, Friday, June 2nd, we'll give you a call, and if you give us the amount, you'll win the cash. Simple as that. The cash machine has been reloaded. The amount you need to know, and that will be won today, is €31,118.27. So to enter, text OTB and only OTB to 57557. That's 57557. If it's you, we'll call you back after 3 o'clock and answer your phone within 5 rings. Tell us the prize amount and you will win the money. Simple as that. So text OTB to 57557. 57557. Cost is €2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You have to be over 18. You're playing across the Go Loud network. Full terms are on our website at offtheball.com. You can get your entry in by 3 o'clock today, Friday, June 2nd, and we could be calling you. Answer within 5 rings, tell us the prize amount, and the cash is all yours. It's pretty simple. And the total again, get your pens out, €31,118.27. Text OTB to 57557. That's 57557. And a reminder that if you're listening to this after 3 o'clock on Friday, June 2nd, do not enter unless you know the current cash machine amount, as you will be charged and your entry will be invalid.
Off the Balls Cash Machine.
All right, we are gone 9:15 on this Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave for your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. And next up, we're going to be talking some GA. Before all of that, some highlights on the OTB Podcast Network today. Brian O'Driscoll is there. Stephen Bradley is there. And League of Ireland Match Day is up there as well. You can follow OTB across our socials. Subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network. After the break, Eamon McGee on the weekend's GA action. Before all of that, though, a clip from the Hurling Pod where they chat about Limerick getting back in their groove. The Hurling Pod is with Bord Gosh Energy, proud sponsors of the Senior Hurling Championship and the Legends Tour Series taking place at Croke Park.
You're listening
to OTB AM.
3, 2, 1, go.
Whether you're a Drive to Survive fan or Grand Prix expert, now you can stay up to date with the world of F1. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza, the ultimate podcast for F1 fans. The F1 Pod will keep you on the edge of your seat. For the best insight and analysis, subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. The F1 pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza. Formula One? Yeah, we go to town on it.
Would you agree, Skel, that Limerick are maybe building a little bit? Because we had this feeling that maybe they were working their way into the championship early doors in the first couple of games.
Well, I think they're meeting hurdles they haven't met before in the past. I think they're getting tested in such a way that probably hasn't been presented to them in the last 4 or 5 years. I suppose in the last couple of championships, like barring the Munster final last year, there has always been a sense that when Limerick played in game, that this could be 5, 6, 7, 10 points of a gap. You never got the sense that even when a team was clawing back, that they were going to actually overtake Limerick. That's how good they were. But in this year, I suppose getting from the off, especially because the league was a different story. They continued their mode of domination. But in the championship, Waterford, you said to yourself, that was maybe Waterford planning for a few weeks and probably got a good performance, and let's take it for that. Then the week after you're saying, Jesus, maybe Limerick are coming back a touch. So they've been tested in a manner that we haven't grown accustomed to. But you have to understand that they are building a steely resolve as well. Like they've been questioned on the field, they've been questioned off the field, they've had injuries, that have players with discipline issues, that have out of form. So if you were to couple all the things that we said at the start of the year that would be required to take down Limerick, they're all happening. Everything's actually happening to them. And so for them to come through a very, very tough championship group stages and still qualify for Munster final, I'd say it would be very, very pleasing. Now, I don't think they'll rest in their laurels. I don't think they'll say, right, now we're going to take off and everything will be fine. I think there's still probably high alert down in Limerick that they have to keep this rocking and keep the work going and keep trying to improve, because there still was that little bit of lack of slickness that was happening today with drop balls and missed moves and slippages and whatnot, and wides, loads of wides, and then the free count as well. The free count was massive. So I think if John Collins is assessing this game, like in the past he was giving out about wides, and that was it, because the margin was so big in defeat for the opposition, whereas now he's got a few areas to focus on, and I think he'll be happy. And you can see him, he was really animated on the sideline, something we probably haven't seen him since probably the Ireland semi-final last year, whereby he was getting into it and driving on his players because there was no need for it up to now. So I think they're on the right track. They're not where they were this time 12 months ago, but they're heading in the right direction, and there's going to be a humdinger of a game come 2 weeks' time.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Alright, 9:20 on this Friday morning's OTB AM. Turn our attention to Gaelic football. It's a jam-packed weekend of Gaelic football action in games in both the All-Ireland group stages and the Tailteann Cup as well. Delighted to welcome the former Donegal star Eamon McGee to the show this morning. Eamon, how are things?
Hi Shane, how are you?
Not so bad, thanks for hopping on. We'll get into the games in just a second, but you had a tweet that was kind of along similar lines of what I was saying during the week. The Rossies are getting some serious heat for the long periods of possession against Dublin last week. Some calls that Gaelic football is dying or already dead. What's your take on this?
Again, Shane? How many times have we heard that Gaelic football is dead? I think we heard it in the introduction of the blanket defence and numerous other times after it now. So, no, my thoughts, I actually don't mind the possession game. I just kind of find it intriguing to see how teams try and work it out. And I'll add in, I don't like keeping possession because we see it in the club games when teams wouldn't be as coached as well, and they're keeping possession for possession's sake. I like when teams are keeping possession but probing at the same time. They're coached well. There's an overall purpose, but we've seen it in games throughout the year where it's just keep ball, keep goal, and there's no overall goal with the whole thing. So I'll have to admit I'm in the minority now. I think I don't know where you sit, Shane, but I think at 10% and the 90% want to see that fast flowing, Gaelic football as people would have remembered it now. So maybe we'll have to talk about change.
I'm probably along similar lines to yourself. I actually quite, in a weird way, enjoy the periods of possession. I guess the argument is that the onus is on the likes of Dublin and the teams playing that type of team to get the ball off them. Now that's easier said than done. There are people calling for rule changes. Eamon, I don't know if that's something that's crossed your mind.
Some of it, lads, I'm sorry to be the dissenting, I'm definitely in the 90%. How are you, Eamon? Some of it is desperate to look at.
But how do you change it?
There's loads of all sorts of stuff has been introduced about passing the ball back or shot clocks or whatever it might be, but some of that lateral stuff in and around the defensive D as they try to. Admittedly, there's an intrigue about it, Eamon, as you say. But God, for long periods of time, particularly I find it towards the end of games. Let's say there's 5, 6, 7 minutes to go in games at times, and a team is a couple of points ahead, and over and back we go, and it doesn't make for a great spectacle.
And I get that, but that's the way it's going. That the rules of engagement in Gaelic football have changed. So this is part of it. If you think back to the Derry Monaghan game last weekend, where Monaghan went down a man to the loss of man, the Black Gary Mohan, was it?
Yeah, Gary Mohan.
And Derry made the decision, right, we're going to push up here. We're going to push up, and Monaghan are down to 14 men, and we're going to try and turn them over higher up the field. And even at that, Derry are physically in brilliant shape, very well coached. Monaghan still worked the ball. So the best thing Derry could have done was sit back, and Monaghan would have to play that that possession style of football. So that's the rules of engagement. It's all catered towards, or all based towards, that the team that drops back, it suits them, and the possession game, it suits them to work it out. So until we change that's just the way it's going to be. And this thing of go out and give it a go, and die in your shield and play with honour, and enjoy the game, it's nonsense. We've seen that throughout so many sports where managers, coaches, players just want to win. So that's just the way it is. And the rule changes. If we're going to go at it, and I think Adrian is in the 90% there. If we're going to go at it, we need to just strip it all back. We can't just keep on putting rules and creating this big massive book where there's about 1,000 different rules, because the game's so hard to ref. So I think we're going to have to strip it back and start from scratch here.
Yeah, the shot clock one it's a great idea on paper, but I don't see how
I don't know that it's the solution, by the way. I'm just throwing it out there, and I think Eamon is right. Like, in terms of the rules that have been suggested to bring in now, this freshers testing and that stuff, that doesn't do anything to address what we're talking about.
Well, what do you make on those ones, Eamon? Even the kick out, is it the freshers competitions the next year they're going to bring this rule? The kick out has to go out a certain distance.
No, I there's rules, and I like the mark, the offensive mark, because it's actually, despite all the detractors, it's taken in more kicking. Teams are kicking more, but this kick out rule, where there's a kind of nostalgia where we just kick the ball out, catch it, and then kick it on again. I think we're trying to hang on to that there, and the real pragmatic point of it is that, like, I play Gaelic football in Marigallon, and there's a constant wind, and you'd struggle. There's some keepers would struggle to kick it out to as far as the 45. So, we have to take that in, and we'll see it more now as more outfield players go into the goals, that they don't have the distance in the kicks. So long term, I don't think that kick out rule is going to be a rule now. So I think we have to go back to the drawing board with it.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on how the rules change over the coming years, no doubt. Loads of games this weekend, Eamon. I don't even know where we start, but certainly tomorrow, Saturday, we have Cork, Kerry and Páirc Uí Chaoimh at 3, Westmeath Galway then in Mullingar at 5 o'clock. You've Kildare against the Dubs in Kilkenny at the same time, in Tyrone Armagh at Healy Park and Omagh from 7. You have 4 games in the Tailteann Cup as well, and then on Sunday you have Mayo Louth in Castlebar from 2, Monaghan Clare in Clonus at 2, Roscommon playing Sligo in the Hyde at 3 o'clock, and Donegal against Derry in Ballybuffet from 4 p.m. and again 4 games in the Tailteann Cup. We might as well start with your own county, Donegal Derry. Ballybuffet, certainly a fortress for Donegal in recent years, and used to be a fortress. That's fair. I was interested to see comments, or Aidan O'Rourke I think had avoided or decided not to do a media press conference a few weeks ago, and there was a couple of headlines about that, such as the intrigue in football around Donegal, and I think he himself had spoken recently about the media interest and how it maybe affected Donegal players. Is it different in Donegal? Like maybe the win over Clare changes things, but there's pressure on these Donegal players at the moment. I don't think it's different. I think there's a load of counties out there where they're GAA mad and they love their football, and there's different local podcasts in a lot of different counties. There's different local newspapers, and GAA's their main gig with it. So I don't think we're different in that regard, and we just are Gaelic football mad up here, and there's always an appetite, and any wee GAA story gathers legs,
So we've seen it so many times. I've seen so many WhatsApp rumours up here in Donegal. So I wouldn't buy into it. I wouldn't buy in to say that we're different. And the players have been brought up in that. There's not necessarily pressure. They just know the gig and they know the game at this stage.
Will Donegal adopt some of the tactics that Monaghan kind of utilised against Derry? Monaghan seemed to learn from their mistakes from the previous game against the same opposition. Certainly playing players like maybe Shane Carey and Ryan McInnesby, players with a bit more pace to track back, but also push up in the Derry kick-out as well. There are little ways in which you can get at that Derry team.
And that's one of the things I took great joy from watching Monaghan go at the Derry kick out. And I think in the way they went at it now, normally teams are going zonal these days, but they just went man to man, and really, and I thought that day was actually over. Because someone is always going to let you down in the man to man press, but Monaghan just dug it out and really put the pressure on it, and I think it threw Oren Lynch to see it. He kind of took a wee wobble now, so I don't think Donegal will go man to mans as such on the kickouts, but they'll learn there's different aspects in terms of the personnel and the personnel on the field that they'll definitely learn from. Donegal, Monaghan probably had more options. Donegal don't have the same riches and the same depth in their squad, so they might be a wee bit limited and hampered by that. But you could see possible changes, all right, in the team that started against Clare.
It was impressive, the Donegal performance in the second half against Clare. I think they outscored them 11-3, if I'm right in saying. And as you said, they mightn't have great scoring power, but if the likes of Kieran Thompson and Oisin Gallen can pop over their 4, 5, 6 points a piece, all of a sudden you're in with a chance. I guess on the opposite end of the scale, from a Donegal defensive perspective, Eamon, how do you handle Shane McGuigan? I know it's a perennial question, but
this is the one. Shane McGuigan, we've seen in the Armagh game and again in the Monaghan game, where Shane McGuigan just took a notion and says we're not losing this game, and that's kind of the championship mentality. And sometime in the knockout stages that there's going to be a player or defender that's going to wrap up Shane McGuigan, and that's where Derry will have to find another way. Do we have that player in Donegal at the minute? What the way confidence is and what the way we're setting up, I would just struggle now. I think there's potentially Bren McCole could pick him up, and Bren McCole is probably one of our better man marking defenders, but it's a big ask to see him step up to shut down Shane McGuigan for the whole of the game.
The Tyrone Armagh game is one that immediately jumps out off the paper as one of the big one. Yeah. It's the big one, certainly, and Ohm is not an easy place to go. But I was watching the Armagh Westmeath game last weekend, and like Westmeath, so unlucky not to get something out of that match, because I thought it was only the goal from Conor Turbot at the end really that scraped it over the line. Adrian here, very sad, shaking his head. But
yeah, I was just going to say
but it was they did this.
We had David Brady on the previous Friday, and everybody was laughing at the fact that he said Westmeath were going to beat one of these teams, and I was following that going, Jesus Christ, he's a genius.
He was right though, because they did everything right, Westmeath, and it clearly Armagh have their frailties.
They definitely do, and I put Derry in that bracket, and that's the thing with Tyrone are going into this with hope, and the same with Donegal and into the Derry game, and Tyrone are probably in a better spot. They'll have learned, and it's so hard to gauge with the way the season's set up. It's so different to what I'm used to in the terms of the way that we would go at a season back in the day now. So it's hard. Like, teams are going well, they'll go up the graph and then they'll drop down and then they'll go up again. So it's hard to pick that. Probably Galway or the farm team, but outside of that, it's hard to get a gauge in where everybody else is at now. So Armagh definitely big problems coming into the game, but they could turn around and put on a performance again, because they have so much talent in that offensive unit.
One that we want to ask you before we wrap is about obviously Croke Park tomorrow evening, and you talk about getting a gauge. Like, I think that Dublin are very much in that category, and I was interested to see Paul Beelan asking big questions of Dublin in the Independent this morning. He was saying a strong sense that the group has run out of steam, a lot of basic errors, and, like, really concerningly, not showing the same hunger.
And that's the one. We're trying to get an answer why Dublin aren't operating the way. Like they're always going to be a drop off, but the drop off has been pretty big in some of the games. And you wonder why, because when you go through the Dublin team to start against Roscommon, there's still a lot of talent and there's still a lot of big players from that. The best team arguably that could ever play Gaelic football, so there should be still muscle memory, if that makes sense, in terms of what they did, but they've been so wasteful, and I think it's a mentality problem, and I think that if you were to put a blame on anybody, it has to go on the all round. It's not just players, it's not just management, it's an all round thing. Desi should be getting more out of them, and the players should be pushing it on more, and not just maybe ticking a box and going through the motions. But as I say, we'll get through, and we'll get through the preliminary quarterfinals, and we'll get to the quarterfinals, and then maybe we'll see then with the games with the edge, and we'll know more about where teams truly are at.
Yeah, certainly concerning when you see from a Dublin perspective, only scoring 111 in Croke Park is a rare enough thing. Are Mayo legit this year, Eamon? Like Aidan O'Shea seems to have a new breed of confidence. They've defenders come in, the likes of Callan as well, that are brilliant. Can they actually do it?
I want to say yes with Mayo. I want to say it, but Mayo have found a way throughout the years to let you down. So until they actually go and do it, I'll hold fire. But there's so much positives coming out of them, and the way they're looking, and the form of Aidan O'Shea and what he's, and he typifies where Mayo was at, and with his attitude and his work rate and his ability to just do his role, and there's so much positives, but we've been burned so many times by Mayo in the past, so we'll hold fire for another way.
Kerry is the other one, isn't it, really? Because it's hard to know where they're at. They obviously, of course, had a big win in the Munster final, but then that defeat to Mayo in Killarney was very, very disappointing, not just from a result but performance perspective. Of course they'll have time to bounce back, but they might have now this extra game in the preliminary quarter-final, less rest maybe. Not finishing top of the group can have its ramifications, but can Kerry come good? It's hard to rule them out.
Oh, it's hard to rule them out. Any team with Clifford in it, you're hard to rule out. And I think they've got to find the defensive. That's what won them. Although Clifford, right, we'll go with Clifford, but apart from that, the way they defended and their defensive structure helped them win the All Ireland, and they were I don't think they conceded. Was it 1 goal last year? And then in the first half against Mayo, they coughed up 3 or 4. Mayo probably should have had 3 or 4 goal chances, so they've got to get that sorted, and they've got to get Seanie O'Shea back, playing well, and maybe taking a wee bit of pressure off Clifford and freeze him up a wee bit. And the big one for me is just getting that defensive structure right again, and they just build from that and get the ball to David Clifford.
Yeah, as simple as that. I do think that Mayo game is a footnote in history, by the way. I think at the end of it, the season is done. It'll never be mentioned again. And we're going to have you back on where we're going to ask you to recommend some rule changes here, so we'll do that at some point over the next while, because I think there's something in that, and I don't want the 90%, the loud 90% overruling the 10% good ideas. So we'll chat to you again down the track.
Good man, Adrian.
Thanks a million. Eamon McGee on the line there. Always really interesting stuff from somebody who's been there and done it, and interesting to get his opinions ahead of the weekend. Good morning, by the way, to Flying Hellfish, who was in touch earlier on. Said, morning gents, listening from Barcelona on the way to Circuit de Catalunya, which bookends our show with Formula 1 goodness.
Are you going to Mullingar, Westmeath, Galway?
I was only just thinking about it as we chatted. I thought, I could throw the kids in the car and head down, so I might do that.
Sure, why not? I'll be in.
If you go down in no expectation of a result, that'd be because
it's the home game in the group. I
get in bad form, Shane.
Westmeath won't fear Galway.
Yeah, they will. Of course they will. Westmeath will fear Galway.
I don't think at the performance last week, I don't think they'll fear anyone in the group. I think they'll Armagh. If you can push Armagh in Armagh, by the way, and a tough place to go, the Athletic Grounds. There's no reason why you can't get close at least to a result against Galway.
Should have got home. David Brady on again this week,
possibly
give one of his predictions. Sam Allardyce, by the way, has departed Leeds. Is that the way we should word that? He's departed Leeds. He's not been sacked. It's no mutual consent situation. He was in for a short contract. Didn't get his $2.5 million for keeping them up, but he did get $500,000 for like about a month's work. So not bad. Don't feel too bad for him.
A couple of pints of wine tonight.
Absolutely, it's stuck in, Big Sam. You wonder will he reappear somewhere again? We shall see. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave for your money back. Neon Night edition is available now on Tuesday's show. Bank holiday weekend. Tuesday's show. Performance rankings, reaction from the FA Cup final, and we'll have plenty more as well. Besides, Shane, enjoy your trip to Clonus.
Yeah, Clonus, Monaghan, Clare. First ever championship meeting. Looking forward to it.
Right. Yeah. Clare won't fear Monaghan. That's the
no fear. Heading up north.
Enjoy it, and we'll talk to you next week. We're going to leave you with John Giles in conversation with Nathan on the show last night. Have a fabulous Friday.
John Giles is with us. Evening, John.
Evening, Nathan.
So it wasn't to be for Leeds United, and probably showed again on the final day just why they have been relegated, beaten at home by Spurs by 4-1. It's been a bit of a mess this season, to put it mildly.
Oh, dreadful, Nathan. Last match was a disgrace, really. You're playing for your life, and they actually hammered. Spurs totally outplayed them, as everybody could see. 4-1. Really, really terrible. I feel sorry for the fans, Nathan.
Yeah, the crowd shot went to your old pal Eddie Gray quite a few times during the game, who looked a little bit bewildered by what he was seeing. Like, we can talk about Sam Allardyce and his impact or his lack of impact over the few games he had in charge, but like for a final game of the season at home at Elland Road, it just felt like the lack of fight from the Leeds players was staggering.
It was lack of fight. It was lack of everything, Nathan. Lack of ability. Gave goals away right from the off. They've never been good defensively, even under Bielsa. But they had a better spirit about them, about getting forward, and that's how they actually defended. They didn't defend as much under Bielsa, but it was a mess, Nathan. And they haven't cleared it up. Just hear Big Sam talking that he says, well, but I have to sit down with the owners about next season. Well, I can't see it. He had a hard job to do, but he got 1 point from 12, and the team didn't get any better while he was there. So they're in a right mess, Nathan. I think they're selling the club. They don't have a manager. And all the things they've done, the bad things they've done, has caught up with them. There's no doubt about that. I mean, when they go back to Bielsa, when Bielsa was there, they actually said at the time when the results weren't very good, they weren't reaching he wasn't reaching their expectations. This was a fella that did unbelievable stuff at Leeds. Actually, I think he's gone to manager of Uruguay somebody at the moment, Bielsa. But anyway, I mean, there's 3 managers gone since he's gone, and 3 managers have come in, and none of them have done anything. And certainly, Big Sam didn't do anything at all. I can't see meeting the owners where he's going to get the job for next year. I'd be very, very surprised.
It's an example in many ways of how not to run a football club, that you can start life in the Premier League with Marcelo Bielsa as manager and end up with Sam Allardyce as manager as you're being relegated.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. It's a mess. In my opinion, they should have stuck with Bielsa and give him a bit of money. He had a few injuries at the time, and of course the results weren't good, but they didn't back him at all. They said it wasn't meeting their. What was their expectations? He had done miracles for them over the 3 years that he was there, and he was out. So we see what happened in the meantime, Nathan. They've had 3 managers since, and they've gone down without a fight. So it couldn't have been any worse if they'd held on to Bielsa and actually backed him, getting a few players in. But that's hindsight now. But I don't know what they're going to do now, because they were supposed to be selling the club. The last time they went down, I think it took them 16 years to get back. So I can't see them getting back in a hurry next year, Nathan, at all. I feel sorry for the fans. The fans were great, but the fans were very, very upset. I think a couple of the players threw their jerseys into the crowd, from what I can hear, and they threw them back again. That's how upset the crowd would be at the weekend.
When you look at those three teams then that were scrapping it out at the end, Leeds, Leicester and Everton, what is it that separated Everton from the other two?
Well, I think Dyche was there for longer than any of the other two coming in, Nathan. You know, he had a better chance than anybody else of getting to know the players, getting to what he would consider to be the best team on the pitch. And, you know, I think they won well in the finish. They had a couple of good results, reasonable results going into the last match. I think Dean Smith did as good a job as he could do with Leicester. You know, they're another one that, you know, got rid of the manager very early with Brendan Rodgers. You know, they were another club that sold players and didn't back them up by getting players in. First of all, selling players. So I think once the players see that, Nathan, you know, the manager has a very, very difficult job from then on. Very difficult job.
You don't sound like you're holding out much hope of Leeds being able to get straight back up. It's very hard to tell, I guess, with Leicester. They probably had the most quality of the three teams down there, so probably going to lose the most players actually during the summer.
Well, that happens, Nathan. Unfortunately, once you go down, you know, there's an awful lot of money involved in it, in the situation. I mean, they get what do they call it? They get some, what's the thing they call it for the
parachute payments.
Parachutes, you know, but that's very little money compared to the money that's in. I mean, I think all the teams get about 125, 150 million.
Yeah.
Right. I think you get 40 million then. So and they be on high money, the players. So that's when they have to sell. There's very few two teams can hold on to the players, Nathan, when you get into that position. And I don't think Leeds have the money. I mean, they're trying to sell the club as well. You know, I think they were talking about 400 million for the club, and it's down to 150 million apparently, because they're in the what was the old second division, and it's very, very hard to get out of that unless you really can hold on to the players. But you'll find there, I think a lot of the players would want to leave once you get into that situation.
So everything wrapped up then. We have the Cup final on Saturday, the Champions League final and some internationals as well. As a Premier League season with Manchester City winning it for the third straight year, for the fifth season in 6, how do you reflect on it?
Well, it was great, Nathan, you know, to come back. I mean, I think they were 10 points behind Arsenal at one stage, and to come back, it's not an easy thing to do, but the way they did it was extremely good. I think the World Cup might have helped City more than anybody else, Nathan, because a lot of players that they were out for a long time, and quite a few City players in the World Cup, but they had the bigger squad than anybody else, as we know, you know, with top class players. So they were able to get over the World Cup and rest players at certain times. I don't think Arsenal and Arteta had that to do, Nathan. You know, he had to play this. He didn't have the squad of players, as we know, that Manchester City had. So he was playing the same players all the time, and I think that caught up to them as well. Whereas with the big squad that he had, he was able to rest players and still win matches, which he did. And that was the big thing with Guardiola in Man City, to have the players that, with all the matches that they had to play, he was able to rest quite a few players and put out a strong team all the time. I think the season caught up with Arteta physically as well, with the situation that he was in.
So you're going to pick your 11 of the season, your team of the season for us over the next few minutes, and we'll do a manager of the year and a player of the year and a young player of the year as well. Your 11 for the season then, who are you going with in goals?
I'm going with Pope from Newcastle. Okay. Nathan. I think Newcastle have had a great season, and he's been really good. He's a type of lad, his temperament is great. He never seems to be showing off or creating any fuss. He just gets on with the job, and I thought he was brilliant for Newcastle.
Yeah, they had that run pre-Christmas in particular where defensively they were just absolutely brilliant. And he obviously
good temperament. He's never shown off or anything. You know, he just gets on with the job, and I think he's been brilliant for Newcastle.
So you've gone for a back four. Who have you gone with?
I've gone with Walker from City. I think he's had a really good season. I've gone for Diaz from City, who has had another good season, and I've gone from Dunk, from Brighton.
Yeah.
I think it's been absolutely brilliant. I didn't know. I just read during the week or two. He has had a cap or two, and I didn't realise.
Yeah, he's been in and around the England squad a few times.
Yeah, and he was when they played the way they played in recent times, out from the back. I'm not a great lover of out from the back. Him and the rest of the team, absolutely brilliant, cool, got on the job, and a good leader. That's what he looked like to me, because I think Brighton have had a great season.
Yeah, they certainly have. Going to be playing Europa League football next season. Who have you gone with at left back?
Shevchenko from Arsenal.
Yeah.
I think he's been very good. You know, when Arsenal had a really good season, I mean, they collapsed at the end of it, as we know. But he came from City, as we know, and I think he was really, really good. I think he actually improved with Arsenal as a player, in my opinion. You know, he was very good at City. I was surprised they let him go, but he certainly lived up to his reputation at Arsenal and was one of the main players during the year.
Yeah, it was a sort of strange season for a lot of the left backs, in that Robertson seemed to have a big dip at periods for Liverpool. Luke Shaw was excellent for long periods, but probably a bit inconsistent in some of the bigger matches. Manchester City had any amount of left backs across the season, so Zinchenko probably was the one who had that bit of consistency throughout.
Yeah, I thought he was really good, and he's only a young fella as well, Nathan. You know, his attitude, because sometimes it's very difficult for lads to go from City, who are regarded as the main team, and then do as well as he did. You know, it didn't seem to bother him that he's left City. He got on with Arsenal, did his job, did it as best he could, and he was very, very, very good, really good.
You went with Ruben Dias alongside Lewis Dunk. I've seen some teams of the season went with John Stones. Dias, though, when he returned from injury after the World Cup and was pretty much fully fit and available to play, is he the best centre back in the Premier League right now?
I think so. I think he has been for the last few years, Nathan. Gets on with the job, no fuss about him. Really, really good defender. Really, really, really good in that. And who did you mention? Stones. Was it Stones you mentioned there?
Yeah, Stones,
Nathan?
Yeah.
Well, he played midfield when he come back into the team. That's what Pep did during the year. You know, he wasn't playing at the back, and he was very good in midfield. But Diaz is, I mean, if you look at Diaz, he's very seldom in trouble or getting any fuss about him. Just gets on with the job, Nathan. I think he's a real plus defensively for Manchester City.
Who have you gone with in midfield?
I've got with De Bruyne, which we present him, Nathan.
He's won you over?
He had a very, very good end to the season. On the run in there, he was. I think Pep gave him a bit of a telling off at some stage during the season, left him out, and I think he told him, "You're not doing enough," and he wasn't. You know, he's a very temperamental lad, but when he got back in the run in, he was really, really good, especially providing.
Haaland
with the passes.
Yeah.
He was good, but I think he got on to him. I think he's a peculiar lad in many ways. I think we talked about it before. I mean, he made a few comments in the World Cup about his fellow players in Belgium. You know, where he said, "I can't do it on my own. I need some help from around it." So he had a right go to his fellow players, which is extraordinary. And I think during the year, Pep got a hold of him and said, "Look, you better start playing," which he did at the end. He made a huge difference to City on the run-in. And as we know, a very, very talented individual, but he gets a bit sulky, too sulky at times. For me, anyway, I'm not so sure that his teammates would be in love with him, Nathan. But when he's on his game, and he did make all those goals for Haaland, and I think he finished the season brilliantly for City.
Well, in all the most important games of the season for City, it felt as though he was the one who stood up in those matches against Arsenal, against Liverpool, against Manchester United, against Real Madrid. He was at his best on the biggest occasions. So maybe at 31, turning 32, maybe the run of the mill stuff doesn't really do it for him as much anymore.
Well, it shouldn't really, Nathan. I mean, lads nowadays at 31, 32, in my opinion, are reaching the peak, and it depends how long you hold on to it from there, you know. But he shouldn't be struggling. Definitely not struggling at that age because of the age situation. You know, I think he's probably at 31, 32. I think midfield players should be at the peak. And then it depends how they look after themselves after that to keep going.
So, Kevin De Bruyne in your midfield. Who else is in there?
I put Casemiro from United.
Yeah.
I think it's been a big signing for them. Nathan, he's given them something in midfield that they didn't have before.
Quality. He's good off the ball. You know, to be regarded, I suppose, mostly as a defensive midfield player, but he can get forward as well. He scores the odd goal. I think he's been a really, really good signing for United. Played really well. The biggest issue for United in the second half of the season with him was that he ended up being suspended for so much of it. A couple of red cards, accumulation of yellow cards. I think he ended up missing, was it 7 or 8 games that if United had any chance of winning a league, probably evaporated once he wasn't there.
Well, he did deserve some of the yellow cards. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he does get into tackle, and it's difficult for a player like him that go into tackles because they're so good at it most of the time, Nathan. You know, it's very difficult for him to say, I won't go into that tackle, I might get the yellow card. It'd be very difficult. You'd lose them altogether, in my opinion. And it's very easy to pick up cards nowadays as well. But I did see him a couple of times. There were a couple of silly ones in there as well, Nathan. But he did make a big difference to Manchester United.
So Casemiro, Kevin De Bruyne. Who else you got?
I've got Joe Linton. Am I presenting his name?
Yeah, you are, yeah. Newcastle.
Yeah. He came as a forward, Nathan. And I thought he was hopeless. Total waste of money. And they moved him back into midfield. Now, maybe he was always a midfield player, a natural midfield player. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. He gets on the ball. He controls the midfield in many games. He comes for the odd goal. But mostly as a midfield player, I think he's been absolutely outstanding. But I was surprised when they put him in midfield, because I thought, well, if he's not going to make it up front, I don't think he's going to be. But maybe he's always been a natural midfield player. He looks like one now. He's been outstanding, totally outstanding for Newcastle this season.
Yeah, I think if you had told me 3 years ago that we'd be John Giles picking his team of the season and Joe Linton will be one of the midfielders, nobody would have believed you. It's quite
I wouldn't have believed it myself. But he's been outstanding getting on the ball. He's like a general in midfield. Yeah. He gets forward well. You know, he gets his tackles in. He looks like a natural midfielder to me. I've never seen a forward come back into midfield and be able to do what he does. He's been brilliant.
We don't have an Arsenal. Oh, we do. We've Zinchenko. We've one Arsenal player so far. Yeah. But you're going to pick another one?
Yeah, I've got Odegaard in there as a midfield player, Nathan.
So
I think they've had a good midfield, Arsenal, but he's been outstanding in the midfield. You know, he gets work rate, he scores goals. Arsenal have been very good with the players, and a lot of young players in midfield there. But I think he's been outstanding for Arsenal.
Has Odegaard got the talent to get to De Bruyne's level?
He might be a different type of player, you know. Well, De Bruyne is exceptional in what he can do on the ball, Nathan. You know, Odegaard there'd be very few of them in the Premiership that could do what De Bruyne does. But I think Odegaard he'd be a different type of midfield player. He'd be a good goal scorer. He wouldn't be able to make the goals, the way De Bruyne does, but he's well able to hold the ball, beat players, get a few goals himself. I think he's been outstanding for Arsenal this season.
So you've gone with him ahead of Saka and Martinelli, the other two Arsenal players.
Yeah, they're more wingers, you know. Again, good players, a lot of good players at Arsenal, but I think he might be a bit older than them. I'm not so sure of his age. but I think he's been very influential in the big matches and responsible in a big way for the way Arsenal have played this year.
So you've got your four midfielders. You're going to go with, well, two-ish up top. You're going to keep it straightforward with one of them, I'm sure.
Well, Haaland is the outstanding player for Manchester City this year. I mean, the amount of goals he scored is just incredible. In his first year as well, Nathan, and he's only 22. So he can only get better, but to score in your first season in the way that he has scored, important goals, big goals, he's been amazing. I think his attitude as a player is really, really good. You can tell that he gets on with his teammates. He always gives them credit when they make a goal for him. Because a lot of goal scorers are not like that, Nathan. They're very selfish. They don't care about the rest of the team, a lot of them. But you can tell that with the players that he's got on well with his colleagues. He plays as a team player. He's been absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, 36 Premier League goals, 52 goals in all competitions.
Amazing.
And of course he has
Nathan. Yeah,
two more big games to go. So he has two more big games to go as well, Erling Haaland, with the two cup finals.
He's got the big ones, And the thing is, he's done his goals in all the matches, Nathan. You can't look at anything and say, well, he scored 3 against one of the low teams. I mean, he's done them on the big teams. He's been absolutely brilliant. I've never seen anybody have a first season with the ability that he has. And again, he's only 22, Nathan. Players usually reach their peak about 27, 28. So, he's been a huge player on first season, and there's no reason, apart from injury, that he shouldn't get better.
So that's 10 of your team. Who's the last one in?
I've gone for Rashford.
Okay.
I think Rashford's had a really good season at Old Trafford. He scored good goals. I think he's got better as he's got older. I think when he was younger, he was missing certain qualities. I don't think he believed in himself as much as he could have done. But now he's a mature player. He plays for the team. He gets his goals. And he's a very, very talented lad. He's a big lad, as we can see, but very mobile, very quick. Good finisher now. I think he's had a really, really top-class season for United.
You mentioned qualities that he was missing before. What's changed about him?
I think he was a bit in awe of playing for Manchester United as a Manchester United player. I don't think he really believed in himself, whereas now he's got a bit older and he has that confidence to do what needs to be done and the ability to do it, Nathan.